Welcome back to the channel. This is Ready Storm and you are watching What If Naruto Was Given a Test by Kami. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
One late summer evening, three figures sat in a darkened room with only a lamp for light. One looked like a young woman, maybe 12 years old, although her face was hidden. There was a hardened attitude about her. Sitting directly across from her were two other people who looked to be in their late 60s or early 70s. Due to the limited amount of light, it was difficult to see the features of the elderly group, but it was possible to make out a pair of glasses and the female of the pair wearing a bun with an extended sebon in her hair. What seemed to be the lone male in the trio said, "You know what you must do, child." Like a general telling a private of his or her mission, he sat in a chair facing the other two figures in the room. Staring back at the two elderly people in front of her was the youngest person in the room. "Yes. I must kill Naruto Uzumaki. He is a threat that must be eliminated. His presence will only endanger the village as a whole. It will be done, and in exchange." The elderly woman smiled, revealing the rather sinister nature of her request. "We will guarantee you a place as the wife of one of the most prestigious clans in Konaha no Sato when the time comes." The third member's pink lips formed a smile. The youngest member departed the room after saying, "Consider it done." The elderly woman questioned, "Have we done the right thing? It is for the good of Konaha. There are simply too many risks involving the boy. If he survives, Konaha will become a major target for anyone looking for his power. This is for the best," the elderly gentleman said. Nobody knew that this plot against a single young man would permanently alter the village. In Konaha no Sato, it was a normal sunny day. Well, normal for most. It was test day for the newly graduated genin. Yes. Exactly. It seems that none of the students knew about the existence of a second test. As a result, they were all at their Jonin sensei's mercy today. At the moment, a group of trees that formed the perimeter of the third training ground concealed one team of genin inconspicuously. A young man with a pale complexion was the first and by far the tallest of the three young hopefuls. The young man was barely visible, wearing a sea-green coat with a high collar to hide the rest of his features and a pair of round, black sunglasses to cover his brown eyes. The youth's outfit was completed with a hite-8, or forehead protector, a blue cloth tied around his bushy brown hair, a pair of brown shinobi slacks with a kunai pouch tied around his right leg, and black shinobi sandals. Shino Aburame was his name. He was descended from the Aburame clan, which was an expert in the hidden methods of employing destruction bugs, or kakaichu. It was easy to identify the group's lone other male as an Inuzuka. He had sharp canine teeth, claw-like nails, thin eyes with vertical canine-like slits, and a bushel of untidy brown hair. His ancestry was clearly visible from the red triangular tattoos that rested on his cheeks. His outfit included a gray parka-style coat with black fur, a hite-8 with a blue cloth, and a pair of grayish-brown pants. Kiba was his name. Akamaru, a little white dog with brown ears, was perched atop his head. Kiba was the son of Sume Inuzuka, the Inuzuka matriarch, and he and his dog practiced collaboration jutsu. A timid little girl with pale lavender eyes completed the trio of genin. A pair of bangs framed her face, and her hair was a midnight blue color. She appeared to be enhanced by her fair skin tone. She wore a black undershirt with light chainmail reinforcement, navy blue pants, blue shinobi sandals, and a beige hoodie with the fiery Hyuga clan symbol on the upper right and left sleeves. Like her allies, her hite-8 was blue. She wore hers around her neck, though, in contrast to the others. She was Hinata Hyuga, the Hyuga clan's current heiress. She shared the Byakugan, the clan's notorious dojutsu Kekkei Genkei, with the other members of her clan. In addition to having a nearly 360-degree field of vision, it allowed her to see the chakra pathways that others would not be able to see. The Hyuga clan members are able to use Jukin, or the gentle fist, style of taijutsu because of their improved vision. The technique effectively stops a person from using chakra and, in certain situations, can result in organ failure and loss of mobility. It also enables the user to strike tenketsu, or chakra points, throughout the body. Kurenai Yuhi, their Jonin instructor, was in charge of the three genin. Kurenai had just received a promotion, making him a relatively new Jonin. Unlike most of her co-workers, she wore a uniform consisting of what looked like black and white strips of fabric, with wraps covering her arms and other parts of her body. Kurenai was dressed in black and wearing a hite-8. She had a black ring around the pupil of her piercing red eyes. Her long, untidy black hair even seemed to be screaming for attention. In spite of this, she was a composed and cooperative person. Genjutsu was her specialty. As part of their test, the four-man cell was now hidden. Being able to learn about a target without being noticed would be one of their skills as a tracking team. After all, not every tracked target could be captured immediately upon tracking it down. Kurenai then set a test for Team 8. Spy on a team and learn as much as you can about them in the same way that you would need to follow a target without it spotting and fleeing. The idea was to be able to collect the information without being discovered. Her team decided to try to conduct reconnaissance on the group that was occupying training grounds 3 at the time. It was the middle of a training session for the team in question. A man with white hair who appeared to defy gravity's established laws was clearly the one testing the recently formed Genin team. The Genin did not appear to recognize their teacher, however. Anyone else would identify the strange man as Kakashi Hitaki, the copycat nin. In addition to metal-plated gloves and a mask that covers his face from eye level down, Kakashi nearly always wore his uniform, which was the standard issue of the majority of Jonin in the village. He was in the midst of yet another test for Genin hopefuls, and his black Hite 8, which covered his left eye, occasionally earned him the nickname Cyclops. Nevertheless, the 3 before him were falling short of the initial hopes he had for them. Sasuke Uchiha, the last member of the Uchiha clan, came first. Sasuke wore a blue shirt with a high collar and the Uchiha fan on the back, tan shorts, a blue Hite 8, and black sandals, giving him a somewhat ninja-like appearance. Sasuke was, in a sense, turning out to be more of a letdown than the majority of the village would have believed. To be sure, he displayed impressive jutsu skills and a broad display of sophisticated tactics. The crucial word here is, he. Sasuke never once sought assistance from his teammates, and he even came closer to actually receiving a bell than they did at the very least. Kakashi had hoped that the Rookie of the Year would be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the test. Apparently, he was losing control of his inflated ego when Kakashi was his age. Sasuke kind of reminded him of him. I hope Kakashi can convince Sasuke of that if he was able to pass the test. That is. The dead last, Naruto Uzumaki, came next. Naruto was the complete opposite of a ninja in practically every way. He was begging for attention with his shinobi outfit, which included a blue Hite 8, orange pants, blue sandals, and an orange jumpsuit with blue patches on his shoulders and a white collar. He was noisy, annoying, and he jumped right into things without giving them much, if any, thought. In addition, the majority of his motivation appeared to be focused on achieving his goals of becoming Hokage, attracting attention, or attempting to win over his pink-haired crush. But Kakashi was aware of the reasons behind Naruto's actions, at least in part. Naruto wasn't treated as fairly as many other villagers because he was the 9-tailed fox's Jinchuriki. He was rejected by the community, most likely had little education at first, and most likely had to be the way he was to avoid the depression that nearly total social isolation could cause. If Kakashi's enormous reserves and practically limitless shadow clone army were any indication, he had great expectations for Naruto's training. The child was essentially a blank canvas despite his poor form and mediocre skills. Kakashi could easily transform Naruto into anything he desired. The fact that Naruto bore a striking resemblance to Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, and his former sensei, did not hurt. Sakura Haruno, the team's pink-haired girl, came next. For Kakashi, she was a mystery. She appeared to be the stereotypical fangirl, willing to do anything for her love, Sasuke Uchiha, on the one hand. Her chakra reserves were meager, she lacked great strength, and her clothing, a red dress, skin-tight green shorts, and a blue Hite 8, was not as functional as he would have liked. Rather than attempting to enhance what she had learned at the academy, she appeared to be merely demonstrating it. However, there was a gleam in her eye that made Kakashi a little uneasy. Sometimes she appeared to be a woman on a mission. Hardened on the task at hand, he was unable to comprehend what was happening. How could she be a giddy fangirl who faints at the sight of her crush's head one minute and have the attitude of an experienced veteran the next? Fortunately, Kakashi was able to get answers quickly since the bells were still fastened to his waist. The timer that indicated the test's conclusion sounded, indicating that no one had passed. He decided to put Sasuke in a chokehold after remembering his team and tying Naruto to one of the training posts. How disappointing. A Hokage wannabe running around like a chicken with his head chopped off, a fangirl who appears to have dissociative identity disorder and will only act in the Uchiha's best interests, and the final Uchiha attempting to do everything alone. Well, I guess it's time to try to save this team, Kakashi thought. All 3 of you disappoint me greatly. Not only did none of you pass the test, you didn't even attempt to get the real meaning of the test. Naruto shouted from where he was standing on the stump. What are you talking about, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura yelled, "Shut up, you baka," and struck the side of his head with her fist. Her inner voice, known as Inner Sakura, seemed to concur, saying, "Yeah, you're not making it any easier to listen to Kakashi-sensei." From where he was, Sasuke could only say, Kakashi let out a sigh. Simple. This wasn't about getting the bells. This was supposed to be about teamwork. Each of you was supposed to help the other get a bell, not run off to try and win things on your own. I get it, I think so. We were supposed to work together to get a bell, even if it meant giving up your chance at passing, right? Replied Naruto. The response from Kakashi was, exactly, Naruto. With uncertainty practically leaking out of her voice, Sakura questioned, wait, how did you figure that out, Naruto no Baka? Hey, just because I don't get stuff sometimes, Sakura-chan, doesn't mean I am as dumb as Kiba or something. Shino was doing everything he could to hold Kiba in check in Team 8's hiding spot. Kiba roared, let me at him. Let me at him, Kiba-san. We cannot give away our position. Why, do you ask? Because we will fail if we do. Hinata managed to stutter, Kiba-kun, please stay cuckoo quiet. Alright, but if that dumb ass says one more thing about how dumb I am, test or not, I'm kicking his ass. Kakashi continued to explain the bell test after returning to Team 7. Kakashi then took out a kunai and threw it to Sakura, while he took out another kunai and held it at Sasuke's neck. The exercise was to see if you would be willing to work together in order to achieve a goal and to see if you would place the needs of your comrades over your own interests. For instance, Sakura, kill Naruto or Sasuke dies. Now, Sakura would have questioned Kakashi's orders if the situation had been different in Konaha. Killing a comrade was punishable by death, and Kakashi was advising her to carry out this punishment, but she had an objective to achieve. It was necessary to eliminate Naruto as a threat, and the reward for doing so was too big to refuse. Sakura grabbed the kunai and stabbed Naruto straight through the neck, with a sudden speed that caught everyone off guard. The sounds of the outside world seemed to mute themselves, and the world appeared to freeze with the exception of Naruto, who appeared to be losing awareness of the outside world. Everyone was staring at Sakura and what she had just done. There was only one thought in his mind before he passed out. Why? Sakura-chan asked. Kakashi was dumbfounded. This was the first time anyone truly took his order seriously. Even though he had failed numerous teams in the past, most people would have been too shocked to even entertain the possibility. But Sakura had done it without protesting, as if being asked to murder a former classmate was commonplace. That Sakura would have experienced such a thing was beyond his wildest expectations. He could see she didn't like him, but to murder him, he was unsure of what to think. It shocked Sasuke. He might have fallen in love with the pink-haired kunoichi in training if things hadn't seemed so messed up. It was rather appealing, he had to admit, to watch her just carry out commands like that. Even so, he wasn't certain that he would have killed a comrade just because he was told to. Even Sasuke didn't think he deserved that, even though he didn't like the dobi. Dude, did you choose the wrong girl to crush on? Kiba couldn't think. Despite his tendency to act like a jerk, he was friends with Naruto along with Shikamaru Nara and Shoji Akamichi. He recalled some of the tricks he and Naruto had played on their former sensei, Iruka. Amino. Kiba also knew that Naruto had a thing for Sakura. Therefore, the irony was a bit too much for him to witness his friend's crush attack. He was unable to even think of a clever joke to say. Although Shino appeared unfazed, his eyebrows' startled expression said a lot. Because of his insect's apparent tension whenever Naruto was in close proximity, he was never that close to the blonde. Something about him didn't sit well with his insects, and he wasn't sure why. Nevertheless, he failed to see the reasoning behind Sakura's recent actions. As far as he could tell, she was not insane, and Sakura would only act violently if Naruto had hurt Sasuke. However, the pinkette would typically follow that up with a loud tirade. It was illogical of her to attack Naruto without feeling guilty. Kurenai was unsure of what to think. She had never witnessed a student so indifferent to her teammates' safety. She knew what the graduating class looked like because she had read some of the student profiles beforehand. However, there was no mention of a vicious murderer in the class. Even though she wasn't an elite ninja for long, she nonetheless found Sakura's actions odd. She looked over at her other student, whom she considered to be her younger sister, and how she was managing the situation. Hinata was horrified, disgusted, and frightened. She could only see the weapon piercing the neck of the person who most inspired her. The young blonde was even beginning to win her over. The blue-haired girl was inspired by everything about him, including his smile, his determination to never give up, and the way he would defend the weaker side and brag about becoming Hokage. He was now being stabbed by both his crush and his own teammate. Because of her own self-consciousness about her abilities and appearance, Hinata never really connected with any of the young ladies her age, but she also never liked Sakura. The only person with what Hinata desired was her. Hinata was unaware of what Naruto perceived in Sakura, but she desired it regardless, if only to be able to accompany Naruto for walks. She might be unable to do that at all now. She saw that Sakura had removed the kunai from Naruto and was preparing for another blow as time seemed to accelerate once more. Naruto-kun. The rest of Team 8 appeared to be startled out of their daze and put into motion by that single scream. They threw aside any desire to hide and sprang into action, racing across the field to try to assist their comrade. Sasuke and Kakashi appeared too stunned to react to what was happening, so Kiba and Torune hurried over and restrained them. Shino and Hinata rushed to Sakura, who, before Shino rendered her helpless, gave Naruto 3 more wounds. One to the left kidney, one to the gut, and one to the right side of his chest in an attempt to halt the bleeding. Hinata hurried to untie Naruto regretfully. She lacked the skills necessary to treat every wound because of her limited first aid knowledge. In her panic, Hinata managed to stammer out, "K Kurenai-sensei. He's still BB bleeding. We need to get him to a hospital." As he vanished in a cloud of smoke, Kakashi's only thoughts were, "Kiba, knock out Sasuke and carry him. Shino, you grab Sakura, I'll grab Naruto. We need to get him medical attention immediately. Kakashi, you better go and get the Hokage. He will need to know what is going on." He hoped his blonde student would survive today. The remaining members of the group prayed to whatever god was keeping watch over them that Naruto would survive to see another day as they ran towards the hospital. The Sandaime Hokage of Konaha, Hiruzen Sarutobi, wasn't feeling well. He didn't have a great start to the day. First of all, the house was cold when he woke up this morning. Asuma Sarutobi's rather slothful son apparently neglected to fill the fireplace with more fuel the night before going to bed. Subsequently, he had to attempt once more to minimize the amount of paperwork that appeared to be piling up on his desk. He then had to reiterate to Danzo Shimura, who was in charge of ANBU's now disbanded Root Division, that Naruto was not a weapon and would not be made into one. Then it was listening to the village civilian council complain about things that were so unimportant that an academy student could solve them with little consideration. The only silver lining thus far was when Konohamaru Sarutobi, his grandson, stormed into his office and demanded permission to sign the Sarutobi monkey summoning contract once he reached legal adulthood. Overall, it was not one of the most successful days in the aging Hokage's history. Hiruzen knew it would be a long day when Kakashi Hitaki showed up in his office and announced that Naruto Uzumaki, a young man he considered a grandson, was on his way to the hospital due to life-threatening injuries. He suspected that the staff might not give his treatment their best effort and would rationalize it by claiming that there wasn't enough time to save him, that the fox would heal any life-threatening injuries, or some other nonsense the third didn't feel like listening to today. The third Hokage thought glumly, "It is moments like these that make me wonder why I didn't do the sealing myself. I'm getting too old for this crap, but it would have definitely made things much easier for Naruto." A rather eerie scene greeted the third fire shadow as he entered the somewhat spacious hospital room. Leaning against the wall, Sasuke Uchiha was massaging the back of his neck in a manner similar to how one would do so after being struck in the neck while watching and waiting for updates regarding his comrade. Kiba Inuzuka was on the ground, stroking his dog partner, Akamaru, in an attempt to console one Hinata Hyuga. Kurenai Yuhi was giving it her all. Shino Aburame, who appeared to be watching over Sakura Haruno, who was just regaining consciousness, completed the group. Yes, this will definitely not be my day. Right in front of the Hokage was a medical ninja. "Hokage-sama, I have some bad news." The Hokage commanded the medic nin to report, heaving out what he knew would be the first of many sighs of the day. Well, Naruto's injuries seem to have healed somewhat, but he lost a lot of blood, and... The Hokage asked impatiently, "Yes? Well, there's no easy way of saying this. There is nothing physically wrong with him, but his vitals are continuing to drop. Simply put, he is dying." "How can that be? If his injuries are healed, shouldn't he be waking up?" replied Kakashi. "That would be the case ordinarily," the medic informed the copycat nin. "However, it seems that, for reasons non-medicine related, Naruto has lost the will to live. He, for whatever reason, is refusing to cling onto life. I am sorry." That remark caused everyone to pause. Was Naruto letting go of life? That was as close to him quitting ramen as it could get. Naruto was a living example of perseverance. He might lose all of his limbs and only have his sense of taste left, but he would still be screaming about becoming Hokage at one point. He boasted about it himself. For someone like him to give up was simply unthinkable. Hinata broke away from her sensei after hearing the medic nin's report and sobbed by Naruto's side. The Hokage turned to the medic nin in an attempt to maintain some kind of composure. The third told the medic nin, "It is not your fault. Thank you for doing your best." As he went, the medic nin bowed to his superior. Sarutobi said, "All right, who wants to tell me what the hell happened?" But it was clear from the tone that it was an order rather than a request. Kurenai made the decision to speak up. "Hokage-sama, my team was in the middle of its genin test when this occurred. They were spying on Kakashi's test in order to pass. Their goal was to gather information on another team without them knowing about it. I felt it was the best test for a team that was supposed to specialize in tracking and recon. At any rate, we observed the test given to Team 7. I won't bore you with the details as he was going into explaining the goal of the test. Kakashi gave an order to Sakura Haruno, which I assume was supposed to be another test. After the order was given, she stabbed Naruto in the neck while his sensei and other teammate were in a state of shock. The team mobilized to try and get to Naruto, but not before Sakura managed to land 3 more blows to the chest, gut, and kidney, respectively. It's safe to say that the Hokage was extremely angry. He hadn't witnessed such armature errors, utter foolishness, and treachery since he disbanded Root, but this entire incident was full of them. The Hokage focused all of his attention on the pink-haired Team 7 member after noticing the sobbing Hyuga. She appeared to be about to comment on Naruto's status, but she wisely stopped herself when she saw Hiruzen's expression. I sincerely hope that Naruto lives through this, Haruno-san, for if he dies, so do you. Hiruzen cautioned her in a tone that would chill even the coldest of hearts. For the first time in her comparatively brief life, Sakura hoped Naruto survived this, if only to avoid being put on the chopping block. Naruto attempted to awaken. He was in a lot of pain for some reason, especially in his chest, neck, and abdomen. Oh, he thought, Sakura-chan had stabbed him. He couldn't recall how he got here. He must have been dead by then. He attempted to remember what had transpired just prior to his blackout. Then someone started yelling. He was unable to concentrate on a few blurs, maybe a pair of lavender eyes full of tears. Then nothing was there. He opened his eyes slowly. Everything around him, as far as the eye could look in any direction, was white. That was out of the ordinary. He thought death would be more, well, intriguing. The pearly gates, the flames of hell, the scarier than Orochimaru doing Kabuki Shinigami, about ready to devour his soul for all eternity. The people in line, nothing. Naruto said, "So, I'm dead, huh? Well, I guess I was expecting something a little more special. Man, did I ever screw up? With all of the stuff that stupid Fox did, I was half expecting to end up in the darkest pits of hell just by being associated with it, but I guess this is just Kami's version of hell for me, just me being alone, for all eternity, never knowing my family, never having good friends, never getting married, or being Hokage, or anything. Guess that kinda makes me special, huh?" He laughed in a rather eerie voice. Now, I think Kami-sama would be a little more creative in building a personal hell for someone supposedly so tainted by evil, don't you think? When Naruto turned around, he saw what he could only describe as the most stunning woman he had ever laid eyes on in his brief life. Despite appearing to be of average height, she exuded a sense of royalty. A golden sash clung modestly to her figure, tying off her long, flowing white robe. The robe itself appeared to have only a light silver trim and a light gold design of what looked like a dove. She had black hair that fell to the small of her back, with 2 golden rings that fit over her middle fingers to stretch the fabric over her fragile hands. Her arms seemed to have a glove-like fit. Her staff had a straightforward design. It was platinum in color, with a circle on top that had 6 rings in total. 3 hanging off one side of the staff and 3 off the other, hanging off the frame, and a small statue of a bird sitting atop the circle. But it was her eyes that attracted Naruto's attention. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to see much of the eyes. She appeared to have had a pair of spotlights placed in place of her eyes. Her eyes are likely to function as flashlights in a dimly lit room. There was nothing about this woman that suggested she should be treated with respect. Naruto's only response was a feeble, "Kami-sama." Even the tone of her voice conveyed authority to Naruto. "Not quite, young one. I am nowhere near Kami-sama's level, but I am someone that works for Kami-sama. I am what you call a messenger. You can call me Chiyoko." A bewildered Naruto asked, Chiyoko-sama, I mean no disrespect, but where in the hell am I exactly?" Chiyoko, as she was now called, suppressed a little laugh. "You are where all souls go when they are sent to us prematurely. I believe you humans refer to it as limbo. It is where all souls go when you are waiting to see if you are to pass over to the other side, or if you are to return to your world. So, I'm not dead. Not exactly, Naruto-kun, right now. You are just hanging on to life, but you are losing the fight. It would seem that you are losing the will to go on," replied Chiyoko. After a moment of silence, Naruto answered, "It makes sense, I guess. I really don't know why I still continue on most of the time. My life hasn't really worth living most of the time. Sure, it has nice to have people to talk to sometimes, but for the most part, I just want to know what it was like to no longer feel pain, to no longer feel so alone in my life, to not have my very existence acknowledged simply because of what I carried. Who knows, maybe I just want to go someplace where I might be loved, where I can escape the hateful glares and the hushed tones. Who knows, if I'm lucky, I could even see my parents again, whoever they were, even if they don't want to see me. Maybe, I just want to let it all go." "So, are you saying that if there was a reason for you to stay, you would?" replied Chiyoko. "Or, let me ask you this. Would you continue to fight to live, to continue to carry your burden, to live with the hate and the strife, even if it was painful. For the sake of one person, if just one person cared whether or not you lived or died today, would you change your mind? I mean, I can probably count all of the people that would truly miss me on my hand, Naruto said, raising his hand. Maybe, I don't honestly know. Let's see, Iruka-sensei would be sad for a while, but he would probably find a new troublemaker to have ramen with Tuchi Oji-san, and Ayame Ne-chan would probably find a new favorite customer. Konohamaru would probably find a new rival for Hokage, and Oji-san has an entire village to care for other than them. I can't think of anyone. A tiny gap in the space that served as a window appeared before Naruto could inquire as to what Chiyoko was doing. Perhaps you have been looking in the wrong direction. Hinata was crying over Naruto's motionless form. Tears streaming down her face like a river, right in front of Naruto's eyes. Other than the fact that she was a shy, dark oddball and that she frequently stammered and flushed, he knew very little about her. She is crying over someone like him. But why? Through the portal, Naruto heard Hinata's quiet voice as though she were responding to his query. Naruto-kun. Please don't give up. I don't know what I would do without you in my life. You have been such an inspiration for me. You never gave up on anything. You would always try your hardest on everything you did. You are the strongest person I can know. Without you, everything seems so hopeless. You are a great person, Naruto. So, please don't give up, please. F for me? Naruto was inconsolable. Did she think so highly of him? Was she inspired by him, Naruto Uzumaki, the demon brat, the village outcast, and the last person to die? How is that possible? All he needed to do was assure Hinata that everything would be fine. It was painful to watch Hinata sobbing over him, though he wasn't entirely sure why. However, the portal closed before he could confront Hinata and assure her that everything would be okay. Well, I suppose we should get going. Naruto cried out. Wait, what are you talking about? I can't just leave her. What? I thought you said that no one else cared. Don't you want your pain to end? Don't you want to go somewhere where you could be loved? Don't you want to see your parents? Replied Chiyoko. Not if it means breaking Hinata-chan's heart like that. I don't care if I have to fight you for the right. I am not gonna just abandon Hinata-chan like that just for my own selfish reasons. Besides, maybe if I am lucky, when it is my time to go, I can see my family again. Chiyoko grinned. Was he aware that he had just referred to her as Hinata-chan? Well, it's time to tell him the news. Well then, you pass? What? Exclaimed Naruto. You mean this whole thing was a test? Man, I am so sick and tired of tests already. Chiyoko said. Well, that was the point, Naruto, which made Naruto more docile. You see, we don't just give free passes to the land of the living. One must earn the right. You earned yours when you were willing to put the needs of someone else before your own. That was your test. To see if you would still fight, and continue on with the life that Kami-sama has given you, even for the sake of one person. The fact that you still wanted to fight, even when you were reminded that you were going to give up, showed that you had earned the right to continue. Now that you have passed, I shall return you to the living realm. However, Naruto intervened before she could act. First, Chiyoko-sama, I want to thank you for showing me the errors of my ways. Arigato. You are welcome, Naruto-kun. Second, can I ask what would have happened had I still wanted to go on, even if it meant hurting Hinata-chan? Had you decided to continue? Simple. Your soul would have committed the sin of pride and greed by being selfish and thinking of your own life instead of the lives of others, and you would have been sent straight to hell. Chiyoko replied with a smile. Naruto swallowed. Okay, then before you send me back, I have 2 other questions. She grinned. Ask away. With a tear streaming down his whiskered cheek, Naruto said. First, do my parents love me? I figure you guys would know, since you probably have seen them. I know I have no right to ask right now, not after the way I have acted, but it would be nice to know if I was loved. Yes, your parents love you very much. Kami-sama saw how happy they were when you were born. It is a shame you don't know who they are. For that, you have my sympathies. Thank you. I have one last question. You said that they love me, like they are alive. Does that mean they are still around? Not exactly, Naruto-kun. I cannot go into details, but your father is with the Shinigami right now. As for your mother, she is not among the souls we have seen, and since all souls are recorded by either the Shinigami or Kami-sama, that can only mean that she is still alive somewhere. Perhaps, when you return, you should find the time to see if you can find her. Now, go. I think you have kept a certain someone waiting for a little too long. Naruto said. Arigato again, Chiyoko-sama, as he gradually returned to his own reality. As she slowly returned to heaven, Chiyoko said, for all that it is worth, Naruto, I hope you are able to turn your life around for the better. Hinata was still crying over Naruto's corpse. The heiress was terrified that Naruto would no longer be a part of her life in a world full of cruelty, He was her ray of hope. She wasn't totally certain that she could survive without Naruto. When it appeared that there was no hope left, a trembling hand lifted and cupped Hinata's tear-streaked cheek. Hinata gave a little gasp that seemed to startle everyone else in the room. Despite being calloused, the hand that held her face felt warm. Like the soft sunbeams embracing her, she looked around to see if it was one of her teammates, but the angle was off as her gaze gradually dipped to the arm attached to the hand. She realized it was, in fact, Naruto's pale lavender globes met piercing, deep cobalt orbs with half-lidded eyes. His voice was tremulous and barely loud enough for the people in the room to hear. Hine, ta? Hinata could only nod her head slowly, not believing what she was seeing. Not believing her voice, she knew without a doubt that this was Naruto and that he was still alive when she saw his renowned, foxy grin appear on his face. Naruto-kun. Hinata glomped Naruto in an unusual way, sobbing into his hospital gown and hugging him as though he were her lifeline. Sasuke and everyone else released a gathered breath that nobody knew they were holding. Well, I guess we can give Kami credit for that, Kakashi thought. Sakura could only say, that was too close. Well, Kiba thought, at least the Baka wasn't weak enough to die at the hands of the Banshee. I think there might be more to Naruto than what is on the surface. His recovery defies logic, Shino thought. Thank you, Kami-sama. I was certain that we would need to place Hinata under suicide watch there for a while, Kurenai thought. Well, it appears that the Dobi was fortunate, Sasuke reflected. Minato, Hiruzen thought, looks like your son is definitely full of surprises. When Hinata realized what she had done, he gave Naruto a glass of water, which he gladly accepted. After 15 minutes of letting him get her composure and try to stay conscious, Hiruzen turned to Naruto and said, you gave us quite a scare, Naruto-kun. Gigi. I apologize. It's okay. Would it be okay if you and the other members of Team 8 remained here while I spoke with the rest of your team? All right. With hesitation, Naruto said, Kakashi Hitaki, Kurenai Yuhi, Sasuke Uchiha, and Sakura Haruno, please follow me, Hiruzen said with a smile before turning to face the other people in the room with the stern expression of a leader. It's an order. Sasuke turned to Naruto before he left, saying, hey, Dobi, the 4 ninja mentioned earlier then left the room. Yes, Teme? What is it? Naruto inquired with a sly smile. Sasuke said, congratulations, you just proved you were slightly stronger than a fangirl. He then left the room, shouting in frustration. Teme was heard that day throughout Konaha. Hiruzen looked at the 3 shinobi in front of him. He was having Kurenai wait in the hallway outside of his office before he went to talk with her, seeing as how he had different matters to discuss with her. He carefully observed the mindset of everyone in the room. Sasuke seemed to be trying to settle on either being frustrated that he was here, curious as to what was going on, and worried that he was going to be punished for what his team did. Kakashi was acting as professional as possible, although his eyes were similar to those of someone who knew they were about to get grilled by their boss. Sakura didn't even look the Hokage in the eye and seemed to be trying to hold back tears. He wanted to confront Team 7 before he would do anything else on the matter at hand. He listened to Kakashi's report of the test, which made Hiruzen wonder what was going on in Kakashi's mind to make him think that anything concerning the test would have ended well. With a heavy sigh, knowing that this would not be a pleasant affair, the Hokage began his evaluation. I want to begin by expressing my disappointment in each of you 3. One young man almost lost his life today as a result of your actions, or lack thereof. I am very unhappy with the way you handled yourself in this situation, Kakashi, Hiruzen said, focusing all of his attention on the masked Jonin, who winced slightly under his superior officer's examining gaze. For heaven's sake, you are an experienced ninja. As one of our best veteran shinobi during the Third Great Shinobi World War, you have dealt with assassination missions and witnessed more of the horrors of this world than most people almost twice your age. But even with all of your training and experience, you were so shocked by a 12-year-old Genin's attack on her restrained teammate that you couldn't help your charge? You ought to have been able to stop Naruto from getting stabbed 3 more times, even if you were shocked at first. But Hokage-sama, how was I supposed to know that she was going to attack Naruto? Kakashi said in a weak attempt to defend himself. Since it was a test, I didn't think she would have complied with my orders. Then, Kakashi-san, you have a serious misreading of the situation. As a Jonin, you should not have issued such an order to a newly minted Genin who had no field experience. The Hokage noted. Sakura wouldn't have been able to tell if you were testing her or giving her a serious order. One of her level could not have been able to look underneath, to the degree that you attempted to test her. I would wipe that smirk off your face, Sasuke-kun, said the 3rd Hokage, scowling at the expression on the young Uchiha's face. Even though you are the least responsible person here, you are still not entirely exempt. That is ridiculous. What was it I did? It wasn't me who punctured the dobe. The order that was intended to be a test was not given by me, and why am I here at all? I couldn't have done anything. Really, Sasuke noted. I was restrained. Even though that is true, Sasuke, you are not blameless in this situation. If you were the Rookie of the Year, you ought to have understood what the test meant. Rather, you chose to work alone and put your teammates' safety at risk in order to achieve your own objectives. It's understandable that you froze when Naruto was stabbed, but the fact that you didn't even try to break free from your sensei when the attack went on suggests to me that you were either indifferent to his welfare or that you couldn't move past the shock of what had happened. Such mindsets will quickly lead to your allies' deaths in our line of work. You cannot afford to put off assisting your team when they are being attacked in the shinobi world. It was a little embarrassing to realize that another team, who was apparently on the opposite side of the field, was able to get to Naruto faster than his own teammates. The Hokage had a point, though, because he had been using his teammates as fodder while he tried to pass the test alone. Even if he had a goal to reach, he should have helped his team, if only to make sure they didn't hold him back. Also, he and Kakashi were closer to Naruto when Sakura attacked, so they should have been able to assist him. Then the elderly Hokage focused entirely on the girl with the pink hair in front of him. And you? How'd I even start? Launching a murderous attack on a fellow shinobi? Not once, not twice, but 4 times, he was stabbed. Taking a chance on murder charges for it? What on earth were you thinking, Kami? She started to cry, but he wasn't feeling it. Dry your tears, Haruno-san. They won't help you here, he said. Hokage-sama, I was told that Naruto was a threat to the village and that he would bring people here that would want to harm the village because he was a demon. Sakura said after pausing for about 30 seconds to gather her thoughts before responding to the Hokage. I was informed that if I killed him, I would be viewed as a hero by everyone and would be added to Sasuke-kun's list of wives when it came time to restore his C-clan, she concluded. Everyone in the room was obviously shocked. Kakashi was stunned that someone like Sakura would fall for such a blatant ploy. Sasuke was annoyed that someone wanted to marry him off to someone he considered weak in order to restore his clan, but he was more upset that someone wanted his classmate dead, and someone believed that the dead last of his class who ate ramen was a demon. Hiruzen would have been appalled if any of what Sakura had said had been true. If it had just been her carrying out orders, he could have stripped Kakashi of his rank and forced him to retire. If she had just wanted Naruto dead, he could have had her put to death. But if what she had said was true, then not only had someone broken his decree regarding Naruto, but someone wanted him dead, and he needed to know for sure what was going on. Who warned you that Naruto posed a threat, Sakura-chan? The Hokage asked, watching for clues of dishonesty in her face. Sakura replied, It was counselors Mitokado and Utatane, Hokage-sama. Homura-kun, Kaharu-chan. Why are the two of you trying to eliminate Naruto-kun? Hiruzen was shocked. His old teammates wanted Naruto dead. Sure, they were never his biggest fans, but why had he killed? Why now, after all this time? Hiruzen made the decision to investigate, but first he had to deal with Team 7. Now, that makes things a little more complicated, but I'll talk more about that later. For now, you 3, we have to take care of the current issue. All 3 of them had the good sense to appear embarrassed at the moment. Right now, you should consider yourselves very lucky that Naruto survived this, or I would be having you, he said, pointing to Sakura, immediately executed for murder. I would have you, he said, pointing to Kakashi this time, stripped of your rank and have that eye of yours removed, and I would have you, he said, pointing to Sasuke, reporting back to the academy for remedial training, since it is clear that there are still some things that you need to learn about being a shinobi. As it stands, though, I cannot afford to lose any potential ninja right now. Hiruzen sighed for the umpteenth time today. We need all the help we can get right now because our forces are still far from what they were prior to the Kyuubi attack. Furthermore, the maximum charge that can be brought against someone at this time is aggravated assault with intent to kill a fellow leaf ninja. Because Naruto is still alive, all 3 of you are now regarded as ninja under my jurisdiction, so this does not mean that any of you are getting off easy, Sarutobi said without hesitation. Sasuke Uchiha, you will receive the least severe punishment because you bear the least amount of responsibility among the 3 people gathered here. To cover Naruto's medical bills, money will be taken out of the Uchiha clan's personal accounts. Additionally, I want to give you a fair warning. Due to your decisions, your comrade almost died during this test you participated in. This might have resulted in your death or in isolation in the real world. Sasuke bowed his head in recognition, knowing that the punishment he received was little compared to what he could have received, and he was not about to ruin it by running his big mouth. Let this be a lesson about the importance of your comrades and of the importance of working with others. Hiruzen started. Kakashi Hitaki, but stopped when he saw that Kakashi was about to resign himself by removing his headband. "Oh, no, you're not going to get away with it so easily." Kakashi sighed, but froze at the next sentence. "As I mentioned, I cannot afford to lose Shinobi at this time. Having said that, I am seriously doubting your leadership abilities. You committed grave errors that could have killed you. You issued commands that were only appropriate for more experienced shinobi, not recently graduated kids. You miscalculated and committed errors that only novices, not seasoned pros, would have made right now. Hitaki-san, your competence is seriously questioned." "Hokage-sama, what are you saying?" Despite being a little anxious about what the Hokage was planning, Kakashi asked. "I was approaching that I will be reorganizing Team 7 into a 3-man squad because I doubt your leadership skills and I won't jeopardize the safety and well-being of another member of such an unstable team. This will continue until your team is judged stable enough to manage a 3rd teammate and you are judged capable enough to manage a 4th member." Unbelievably, Kakashi was unnerved. This was a bigger dishonor than when his father had killed himself when he was younger. His leadership skills and, consequently, his status as a Jonin, were being questioned. He was aware that he had made a huge mistake and that, had Naruto died, he probably would have been in even worse shape than he was now. He could handle this. He already had a growing list of failures, but he would try to put this one right. "As for you, Ms. Haruno," Hiruzen said, "I am glad I am not able to put you to death for assault. Nevertheless, I find your confession troubling because it links my old teammates to a plot to murder your classmate. You also mentioned that some significant laws have been disregarded in order for this to happen. I can't hold you entirely responsible for that. Even though you may have been convinced to do so, I must emphasize that what you did was illegal. As a result, I will arrange for Anbu to bring you to the headquarters of the interrogation and torture unit so that our top interrogator, Ibiki Morino, can question you and conduct a mind dive. You will be returned to your sensei's custody if your statement is found to be true. After that, a pair of Anbu of my choosing will accompany you to keep an eye on your activities in the village for the upcoming year. A 3rd person will join your team if it is determined after that period of time that you are no longer a threat to others. However, I would advise you to behave yourself well because I will tell the 2 people who will be following you that if it is shown that you are going to pull a stunt like this again, they will execute you on sight. You will be put to death right away for treason and attempted murder if, and this is very important, it turns out that you were lying to me. Haruno, am I clear?" Sakura could only nod her head in recognition. Her punishments frightened her. This wasn't supposed to be this way. She was supposed to kill Naruto, have the elders disregarded as a misguided order from her sensei, have Sasuke-kun's mind wiped clean so that he didn't remember anything, and then live happily ever after as his wife. She realized how much trouble she was in, knowing that it could have put her career at risk and nearly cost her life. She felt ashamed that she was so easily blinded, but also aware that she had a long road ahead of her, and that any mistake could result in her death. However, if it meant that she could be trusted again, she would do it. And she would likely never be viewed in the same way again. All of you should think about what I've said here. Given the situation, I'm being a little forgiving, but it could be worse for all of you. Take a close look at what transpired here and draw lessons from it. Hopefully, Naruto will eventually come to trust all 3 of you once more. I hope he does. For your sake, all of you have been fired." The 3rd said, "Anbu, please escort Sakura to TNIHQ, please." 2 Anbu, one wearing a turtle mask and the other a bull mask, shunshined into the office and took Sakura. Kakashi and Sasuke bowed respectfully and left the office after Hiruzen rubbed his temples in an attempt to dull the resulting migraine. "Well, at least that is one problem out of the way now. It is time to move on to other business," he said, asking his secretary to send Kurenai in over the intercom. Kurenai was a little anxious because she had witnessed Kakashi and Sasuke leave the Hokage's office without their pink-haired teammate, and each of them had a supportive expression of acceptance on their faces. This was not very reassuring to the Genjutsu expert, so it was not surprising that she was nervous about meeting the Hokage right after Team 7. Hopefully, he is in a better mood now than he was earlier, Kurenai thought, bowing in respect before accepting the Hokage's offer of a seat. "Hokage-sama, I'm not trying to be impolite, but why am I here?" Hiruzen grinned and said, straight to the point, "I see," before covering his face with a somber mask. "First, could you please restate the reason your team was spying on Team 7? All I need is some clarification." Naturally, Hokage-sama, my team's test, as I mentioned, was to surveil another team and obtain recon without being discovered. To ensure success, it would be extremely beneficial for a tracking team to be able to obtain information about a target prior to capture. I gave my team the freedom to choose which team they wished to spy on after learning of the numerous teams Kakashi has failed. They decided on Team 7. They were curious as to how someone could let so many teams down. We began gathering information about the team in question while hiding at the training grounds they were using. I think everyone is aware of how that turned out. Following the explanation, there was a lengthy silence that did little to calm the red-eyed woman's nerves. Kurenai finally spoke up after a few anxious minutes of waiting and observing the Hokage's analysis of her remarks. Hokage-sama, is my team in trouble? Did we make a mistake? Even though she had only been a Jonin for a year or so, she was unsure if something was amiss. Hiruzen sighed once more as he saw the anxious expression on her face. I'm sorry, Kurenai, I haven't had a great day, and to be honest, interacting with Team 7 has tried my patience. I apologize, Kurenai, you have nothing to apologize for. You and your group had every right to act as you did. Since spying on another team is typically regarded as a private practice, it is a bit unconventional. You do have a point, though, in that in order for your team to be effective trackers, they would need to demonstrate intelligence gathering abilities. In addition, Naruto might have perished if you and your group hadn't been present. I'm grateful for that. In fact, Naruto is the reason I wished to talk to you, Hiruzen said, watching as she released a breath he was certain she was holding. He went on at her inquisitive look. As you might expect, I took Naruto off of Team 7's roster. I can't honestly abandon Naruto to a team where his life would be in jeopardy. It is my duty as Hokage to make sure he has an opportunity to develop into a proficient shinobi in a setting that is reasonably safe. He waited to see Kurenai's response, but he didn't have to wait long. Hence, I removed him in the hopes that he will be able to be put on a team that will be able to grow without fear of assassinations or attacks by his own teammates. Hokage-sama, that's all well and good, but how is this related to me and my team? I see you're as sharp as ever. Naruto has been removed from Team 7's roster, so I need to find a place for him. According to the law, he can only be trained by a full Jonin rank ninja and is not permitted to work as a freelancer. Although I could choose from a few, the majority of the applicants I believe could be his student or either not of the proper rank or have other obligations. I worry that granting him his own Jonin sensei would upset the council and likely lead to accusations of partiality. At the moment, the only other person who is capable of enrolling him as a student on his own is operating a spy network that is too crucial to the village for him to abandon. The senseis who have already passed this year's Genin are left. Given that his taijutsu style essentially necessitates an early start and that he lacks any jutsu that Naruto could learn without access to the 8 celestial gates, Maida Guy would be a good fit for him. However, I worry that Guy would not be able to teach Naruto much. He could be taken by my son Asuma, but he is already training the next Ino Shikacho trio. And Naruto would just be a fifth wheel on a team that is already well balanced. He could provide the trio with nothing that isn't offset or compensated elsewhere as a result. I want you to lead Konaha's very first 5-man squad. Kurenai was taken aback. Leading a 5-man squad was a great deal of responsibility, and the Hokage was essentially saying that he trusted her enough to manage 4 genin by herself for a newly appointed Jonin with little to no experience as a sensei. She was honored, to put it mildly, but she had a persistent question in the back of her mind. However, what could Naruto, or more accurately, what could we offer him, offer my team? He lacks tracking skills, we aren't exactly combat experts, and I can't really teach him any ninjutsu because my area of expertise is genjutsu. Hiruzen, who had been dubbed the professor for a reason, said, I thought about that, Kurenai, anticipating that question. What Naruto can offer your team is muscle. Kiba is essentially your team's only heavy hitter right now. He might eventually be hampered by his reliance on his senses in combat. Since neither Hinata nor Shino are combatant types, your team might be in trouble if Kiba were to become incapacitated during a battle due to a loss of hearing or smell. However, Naruto's large number of shadow clones, which he could use for training, tracking, and recon, could turn him into a one-man army that would give you enough time to make a plan or flee. He might provide your team with a much-needed fighter for which you would otherwise have to find other funding. She had not built the team with combat in mind when she asked for it, so Kurenai could not argue with the logic. She could see how being forced to fight could be disastrous for her. Sarutobi did point out that shadow clones were originally used for infiltration, so they could be used as a form of gathering intelligence. Regardless of her perspective, everyone benefited. I agree to this duty. Hokage-sama, I promise not to let you down. Yuhi-san, I'm sure you won't now. Don't you think you should meet with your hospital team to inform them of the situation? Grinning, she said, I suppose I should, then leave after saying, you are dismissed. She bowed and walked away. Hiruzen then looked at the photo of his successor, Minato Namikaze, on the left wall. Hopefully, this experience will make Naruto a better ninja and, hopefully, a better person. I hope I am starting to make amends for the mistakes I have made, Minato-kun. While Team 8 and Naruto were having a lighthearted discussion about a number of unimportant topics during the meetings at the Hokage's office, Shino made the decision to ask the question that had been bothering him ever since Naruto returned from the edge of death. Naruto-san, I have a question for you. My Kakaichu seems to react rather strangely around you, or more specifically, around your chakra. I've noticed, does that have a reason? That, along with your rate of recovery, suggests an external source, even though I realize it may not be within our purview. Since learning about the fox, Naruto's greatest fear has been how people would react to him living with him. He could, on the one hand, cover it up with a lie, but he didn't really want to lie to them, and someone would eventually find out anyway, either by looking at his chakra or in some other way. In addition, his near-death experience made him realize how important it was to find true friends. Naruto stiffened. As an added bonus, these people saved his life. Naruto realized shortly after he woke up that the blurs in the eyes he had seen belonged to the three people standing in front of his bed. Naruto didn't have many people who would risk their lives to save his life, except for Iruka, so why did they? He knew that something was different about the three of them, and he decided that they were his true friends. As such, he realized that they had a right to know about him and his darkest secret, even if they later hated him. He had a gut feeling that told him to entrust his secret to the insect user, dog ninja, and quiet young woman. Remember what we were told about Kyuubi no Yoko, do you guys? Yes, but how is that related to anything? Kiba inquired, but Shino urged him to hold his tongue and listen. I mean, think about it, Naruto added in response to their curious looks. Well, we were not told the whole truth. With a single flick of its tail, the Kyuubi could level mountains and cause tsunamis, but one man was able to defeat it when an entire army failed to even scratch it. It doesn't make sense. The three of them gaped in shock, realizing that no one had ever explained how the fox was killed. Naruto's explanation made perfect sense. How could the fourth Hokage kill something so strong? Naruto continued his explanation before their minds could wander. The fourth Hokage, despite his immense power, was unable to murder the fox. It had too much power. He was forced to take the next best action. The fox needed to be sealed into something. An adult would have perished when his system could no longer withstand the strain, and neither an animal nor a container would have been robust enough. Therefore, he sealed the Kyuubi into a newborn using a technique that was prohibited. You say this as though you personally know it. Naruto, how did you find out about all of this? Shino inquired. Instead, Naruto said, I know, because I was the child used in the sealing. As he rose from his hospital bed, moving slowly by his standards because he was still in pain from his attack, and then he lifted his gown to reveal his stomach, building up enough chakra to make the seal visible. I am the nine-tailed fox's container. Naruto then lowered his face to avoid seeing Team 8's expressions as he awaited the fear, the hatred, and the rejection that he knew such news would elicit. As Shino, Kiba, and Hinata processed the information, the room fell silent for a few minutes. It was a bit of a shock to think that someone like Naruto, who always had a smile on his face and appeared to be a dead last and an idiot, was the container of the most powerful monster to ever attack the Hidden Leaf Village. Kiba was amazed that Naruto could be sane and hold back something like that. Hinata was crying as she considered the burden that Naruto had to endure. She recalled how he was treated when she saw him around town as a child, and now things were beginning to make sense to her. Shino, however, took the initiative and approached Naruto, putting a soft hand on his shoulder and saying, I think I understand what you're going through more than most people do. How? You ask because I understand what it's like to be shunned by my peers because of something that was inserted into me against my will. Those who want to know me better are usually turned off by my insects. I think I can come close to understanding what you were going through, if anyone can. Man, dude, how you aren't some psychotic murdering bastard with something like that, I will never know, said Kiba. As Naruto snapped his head back up at a speed that most people would consider unhumanly possible and turned to face Shino, surprised that he wasn't fleeing from the demon brat. I have no idea what you had to endure, dude. I just, fuck. Naruto was on the edge of tears when Hinata said, and Naruto-kun, if anything, this makes you all the more admirable. She walked over and hugged Naruto, saying, I can't imagine it was easy to see. Confide in us with why your secret. To be forced with such a burden and to see C continue to smile just shows how strong a person you are. After her heartfelt speech, Kiba and Shino chose to join in, and even Akamaru jumped up on Naruto's lap after he sat back down on the bed and gave him a slobbering kiss. We are sorry we pressured you, Naruto-kun, but we are thankful you trust us enough to share your burden, she said. Naruto never expected acceptance when he revealed his greatest secret, and for him, the acceptance of these three individuals marked the start of a new journey. He now knew that he would always have friends in this trio of oddballs, even if the rest of the village never acknowledged his existence. Kurenai immediately went to the hospital following her meeting with the Hokage. The sight of her team encircling the blonde knucklehead's hospital bed in what appeared to be a group hug was heartwarming when she arrived at the room where Naruto was staying with Kiba at one side of the bed, Shino's hand on Naruto's shoulder, and Akamaru on his lap. Naruto appeared to be holding on to Hinata for dear life. Kurenai wished she had a camera in situations like these. It's time to break the news, then I'm hoping they'll comprehend. Something I should know about, team? Each of the teenagers reacted as though they had been caught in the middle of something awkward when they saw Kurenai standing in the doorway. Well, aside from Shino, who just gave a shoulder shrug, Kiba abruptly retreated, seemingly to preserve his manliness. Hinata merely reddened and moved away from Naruto. Kurenai smiled knowingly, deciding to take it easy and hope for the best because she wasn't sure how her team, or Naruto, for that matter, would react to the news. So, Naruto, how are you feeling? Disappointed, Naruto said. I'm fine. Kurenai-san, so, are you here to take Kiba, Shino, and Hinata to practice or something? Kurenai chose to clarify after noticing the four genins' perplexed look. Actually, I am here to talk to all four of you, Naruto. I had a discussion with the Hokage about your place as a genin. Wait, I'm not gonna be a ninja, but I worked hard. I beat Mizuki Teme. It's not my fault that I failed the second test, I was attacked, Kurenai said. Naruto, calm down, to get Naruto's attention, and let me explain. She went on once she was certain he would stop talking. You are still a genin. The Hokage felt that, despite what occurred today, all of you including your teammates will be given your ranks. We are in desperate need of shinobi right now, since our forces are lower than what we feel comfortable with. Therefore, you are still going to be a genin, even though you technically didn't take the second test. Naruto shouted, oh, that makes sense. But, wait, does that mean? Kurenai gave her temples a little rub. At least my teammates are letting me say what I need to say. I am getting to that. Naruto, please try to wait until I am done. Naruto closed his mouth sheepishly, but it was clear he was struggling to keep quiet. That will have to be one of the first lessons I teach him. Patience, Kurenai said. As I was saying, all four of you are genin. Congratulations. While observing the four genin holler, smirk, hoop, and otherwise show their joy at being recognized as official ninja to draw their focus back to her, she coughed. That being said, there was a bit of a problem with the team placements, which is what your team and I was talking about with the Hokage. Naruto asked rather glumly, so, Kakashi-sensei didn't want me to be his student anymore because I couldn't defend myself or something like that, huh? Hinata, Kiba, and Shino gave Naruto a sympathetic look. It was understandable that he wasn't happy about not being guided by the copycat ninja because he hadn't had a great day. Not exactly, Naruto, Kurenai said. All four genin appeared perplexed at this. Well, it's time to let everyone know. You see, the Hokage doesn't want you on a team that could get you killed if he can avoid it. Between Sakura's attack, Kakashi's incompetence, and Sasuke's attitude, he felt that keeping you on that team would do more harm than good. That is why he came to the decision that he did. As of right now, Team 7 will be a three-man team, with you removed from its roster. Naruto was taken aback. Was he not going to play for Sakura? It was a little abrupt. Even though he no longer had a crush on her, Sakura attacked him, but neither Kakashi nor the Teme were at fault. He didn't even want to hold Sakura accountable. Although she didn't particularly like Naruto, she didn't despise him, did she? Naruto was at a loss for thoughts. Since everything that had been said thus far had to do with Naruto, the members of Team 8 were wondering why they were here, while Naruto was wondering if Team 7 was really as horrible as the Hokage believed. Kiba made the decision to pose the queries they were considering. So, where does this leave Naruto? Kurenai-sensei. I mean, yeah, I agree that he shouldn't be on a team that is going to kill him, but what does that have to do with us? I'm glad you asked, Kiba. You see, the Hokage has asked me to take on a little more responsibility. He was impressed not only by how our team handled itself, but apparently on my leadership skills as well. To put it simply, he wants me to lead Konaha's first ever 5-man squad. Shino started. Sensei, does that mean? Yes, it does. Naruto, by decision of the third Hokage, you will become the 5th member of Team 8 under my tutelage. Kurenai clarified. I hope you will be happy being a part of this team. Every 12-year-old responded differently. Naruto was unsure of how to react. First, he received assistance from Team 8 and now he was going to join their team. He would not doubt his Gigi's wisdom, even though he was still disappointed that he was not a member of Team 7. Furthermore, he was at least friendly with everyone there, well, aside from Shino, with whom he had little communication and thus was unable to express much. Shino's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He had no idea that someone could have a squad of 5 men. Although he could understand the reasoning behind it, the Hokage's permanent squad consisting of more than 4 members was still uncommon. Kiba grinned, being able to collaborate with Naruto, with whom he had been friends in school, seemed like fun. Well, he thought, at least there won't be a dull moment. Hinata was a little overwhelmed. She had always dreamed of Naruto and herself being on the same team, but she never imagined that would ever happen. Thus, in keeping with her true nature, Hinata blushed profusely, passed out, and collapsed backwards, into Naruto's lap. After hearing Kurenai's statement, Naruto started to feel a little anxious. Hinata. Are you okay? Say something. Kurenai-sensei, is Hinata gonna be alright? Replied Naruto. Kiba and Shino were so shocked by his incompetence that they both started to perspire. They knew that Hinata liked Naruto, but he was either too naive or too socially awkward to realize that Kurenai took a set of smelling salts from her pack and used them to wake Hinata after giggling a little at the antics of her surrogate little sister. Kurenai said, "Welcome back, Hinata." As Hinata awoke, when Hinata realized what had happened, she leapt from Naruto's bed and started to flush once more. She silently scolded herself, saying, "G Gomen, Naruto-kunai, I don't know what came over me. Dumb Hinata, he probably thinks you're a freak now that you fainted on Naruto-kun like that." "Don't worry, Hinata, it was an accident," Naruto said, grinning his trademark smile. Hinata was feeling dizzy. She was relieved that Naruto understood her and didn't appear upset or ashamed. She just bowed and smiled. Kurenai grinned. Knowing that Naruto was getting along so well with his new teammates was a pleasant feeling that added to the horror of what she had to do next. She was aware that Naruto needed to reveal his darkest secret if he was to contribute to the team. "Now that the news is out of the way, Naruto, I think it is time to tell your teammates about your secret." Kurenai was in complete shock when he said, "Ichi already told us about the Kyuubi, Kurenai-sensei." When she turned to Naruto for confirmation, he merely nodded his head. She was concerned about Naruto's motivations and wasn't entirely prepared for him to tell them. "Naruto, care to explain why you told these three about the Kyuubi?" "I can't really, Kurenai-sensei," Naruto informed him. "Shino asked me about my chakra, and I couldn't think of a lie that could explain things that someone like Hinata here would be able to figure out for themselves. Plus, for some reason, I feel I can trust these guys. I mean, you all did save my life, so I can at least be honest with you, right?" Everyone was beaming at this. Although it was a straightforward explanation, it was very powerful. At that moment, Kiba came to a realization. "Hey, that reminds me. Naruto, if you have held that gigantic bastard for so long, how come no one else has told anyone about it? I mean, I am guessing more than just the Hokage and our senseis know about this." Kiba replied with a confused expression on his face. Akamaru agreed and barked. Asking, "If I may, Naruto," Kurenai said she would be able to tell his new teammates more effectively than he could. Naruto decided, nodding his head. "You see, Kiba-san, there was a law put in place by the third Hokage when Naruto was born. You see, he felt that people would treat people worse, or possibly kill him, if word spread that Naruto was the container of the Kyuubi no Yoko. So, he enacted a law that stated that no one was to talk about the fate of the fox. It was punishable by death. He hoped that it would allow Naruto-san here to grow up normally. Obviously, the best laid plans of mice and men went awry. So, Naruto was supposed to grow up like an normal person? She didn't want to frighten Kiba, Shino, or Hinata, but she had to make it clear that it was a secret. "That is exactly right, Hinata. That is why no one your age knows about the fox now. We need you to understand what Naruto and I just explained is considered an S-ranked secret unless someone else knows about it. You cannot tell anyone, understand? Doing so is punishable by death." They all appeared to accept the situation. Hinata, Kiba, and Shino departed the room after saying, "Now, if there is nothing else, it is about 6 p.m., and I believe we should let Naruto-san get some sleep." She turned to leave, but not before turning around and saying, "I spoke with the nurses. Naruto, you should be able to be released by tomorrow afternoon. We will come back then to pick you up." "Oh, and Naruto-san?" "Yeah, Kurenai-sensei. I'm glad you trust us enough with your secrets. I hope we will continue to earn that trust. Rest assured, I will do my best as your sensei to make you into a fine shinobi. Get some sleep." Naruto replied, "Yes, sensei," and then he fell asleep, hoping for better times. Hinata turned away from her teammates to go home for the night. Outside the hospital, Kiba and Shino were left alone to reflect on their recent education as a team. They decided to grab a bite to eat since neither was required at home that evening. Until later, they both chose to dine at the well-known Korean barbecue restaurant in town, Yakiniku-Q. They happened to arrive just as Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi were seated to eat. The Akamichi clan's rotund young man was Choji. The hidden techniques, which involved the ability to enlarge one's body to enormous proportions, were the specialty of his clan. He had beady brown eyes, brown hair, and red swirl marks on his cheeks. He had 2 tufts of hair on the side of his head from the way his hite was worn. He was dressed in a green jacket, gray shorts, a white scarf, and a gray shirt bearing the symbol of his clan. In order to demonstrate their affiliation with Team 10, all of his teammates now wear the earrings he wore. The Nara clan, which specialized in shadow techniques, was Shikamaru's clan. He wore earrings like Choji's, had brown eyes, and black hair tied in a pineapple style. He was dressed in gray pants, a hite-8 on his forearm, and a fishnet shirt with a short jacket. Kiba and Shino made the decision to join their fellow comrades for dinner when they noticed they were about to sit down. During their cordial chat, they mentioned that Ino, the female teammate of Team 10, had left early to work at her shop because her father had been called to interrogation for unspecified reasons. Until they made the decision to discuss the day's tests, everything was rather normal. Yeah, Shoji and I had an easy test with Ino and Asuma-sensei. All we had to do is tie him up. I got him with my shadow possession jutsu. Shoji rolled over him with his human boulder, and Ino took him over with her mind transfer jutsu. It would have been too troublesome to do anything too elaborate. Shikamaru clarified with the enthusiasm that a cage deals with papers. Yeah, it was okay, Jenin, who had a large frame, said. So, how was your guys' test? After exchanging sidelong glances and nodding, Shino and Kiba adopted serious expressions with a hint of venom. Kiba responded sarcastically, oh, it was fine. Up until Naruto was stabbed 4 times by Sakura. Shoji and Shikamaru sat there, staring. Neither was entirely sure how to interpret the charge. Shino nodded in agreement as they turned to face him. With his entire focus now on the 2 members of Team 8, Shikamaru said, okay, I'll bite. How do you know all of this? Kiba then discussed the day's events, beginning with Team 8's test and ending with their departure from Naruto's hospital. Naturally, after recalling the Third's Law, he omitted the part about the Kyuubi. It would be an understatement to say that the men of Team 10 were taken aback. In school, both were regarded as Naruto's friends. They were aware of his occasional annoyance, but it was nearly unthinkable that a fellow student would attempt to murder him. It didn't make much sense to Shikamaru. Sakura had always expressed her dislike for the blonde, but attempted murder? Even Ino, he was certain, would not go so far as to try to murder someone in that manner. Choji, for his part, was unsure of what to think. Sakura never really appealed to him. She was one of Sasuke's biggest fans and was loud and pushy. Indeed, Ino was, but because Shikamaru and his families were so close, she was at least partially his. Sakura apparently couldn't tolerate anything related to the young man with the whiskers. Well, I can't say I'm not surprised. I know Sakura hates Naruto's guts, but why would she try to kill him? Replied Shikamaru. Honestly, we don't know what more can be said about it. Without knowing all of the details, all we can do is attempt to move on. Whatever her reasons are, she isn't about to tell us, replied Shino. Well, I think we should visit him tomorrow. What do you think, Shikamaru? Shoji asked. I suppose it wouldn't be so troublesome. We can ask Asuma-sensei tomorrow, replied the Nara. Well, it's getting late. I suppose we should be heading home. Come on, Shoji. Kiba shouted, okay, later guys, as he and Shino walked out of the eatery in the hopes of gaining some ideas. The 2 boys had some questions that needed to be answered. Hey, Shika, how do you think Ino will take the news of what happened with Sakura? Shoji asked. According to Shikamaru, I'm not entirely sure, Shoji, they are rivals, but I'm not sure how she would react to Sakura being under arrest. As he and his plump companion headed back to their separate houses, Shikamaru hoped that once she learned, she wouldn't cause too much trouble. Sitting behind his desk, Hiruzen regarded the 3 people in front of him critically. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, he was attempting to close out the day as positively as possible. He was preceded by the heads of the 3 biggest clans in Konaha. Shibi Aburame, who resembled every other Aburame male except for the gourd on his back that contained more of his Kakaichu insects. Hiyashi Hyuga, the regal leader of the Hyuga clan, who wore the emotionless mask that most people associate with the clan. And Sume Inuzuka, the only matriarch in Konaha who also held the position of clan head, dressed like an experienced Tokubetsu Jonin. Hiruzen was most nervous about this meeting out of all the ones he had today. Although he was aware of how well each family collaborated, he wanted to ensure that none of them would clash with Naruto on Team 8. I suppose you were curious as to why you were all here, right? Though Shibi appeared to maintain his monotone, his posture suggested curiosity. That would be a correct assumption, Hokage-sama, he said. Well, it is concerning your children, as long as she doesn't embarrass the clan, and she does not drag her teammates in the muck with her. I have no problems with her being paired with an Inuzuka and Aburame, Hiyashi said with a scowl. Hiruzen eyed Hiyashi and said, I am glad to hear that, Hiyashi-san, but that is not what I am referring to. Sume started to say, wait, don't tell me that they didn't pass. if Kiba didn't pass his test, but the Hokage cut him off. Actually, they all passed however, due to circumstances with another team. All 3 of your children will have a 4th teammate, making their team the first 5-man squad. He went on. He sat quietly, watching the 3, and said, I am forced to place Naruto Uzumaki with Team 8 because of a fear of personal safety on his part. Sume appeared a little taken aback but otherwise receptive. Shibi didn't seem bothered by Naruto, and Hiyashi gave the Hokage a disinterested glance. I take your silence as the 3 of you saying that you are alright with this? As I stated, as long as my daughter does not do anything to embarrass the clan, I could care less. I already abandoned her training. Besides, my clan is not so petty that we would blame Naruto for the fox. One cannot hide much from the Byakugan, and it is plain to see that he has 2 different types of chakra within him. Hiyashi continued. We mostly distance ourselves to avoid being associated with a pariah. Hiyashi was followed by Sume in speaking. Hey, I may have had my misgivings about the pup, but as long as he remains loyal to the village, he is under your command, so I won't question your wisdom on the matter. Shibi said, I have no issues with this, Hokage-sama. Last. Thank you. I simply wished to make sure you were aware of what was going on. Now, unless you have concerns about Naruto or your children's well-being, you are dismissed, Hiruzen said. 3 highs were heard from behind in his chair. Hiruzen sighed. He feared that someone would complain, but it seems that he misjudged the clan's tolerant attitude, or at least their apparent lack of concern. After concluding that final meeting, he got up, stretched, and secured his office for the evening. The Hokage needed a good night's sleep, or at the very least, a nice cup of calming tea. When Sasuke wanted to be alone, he always went to sit at the edge of what he called his dock. He reflected on what the Hokage had told him in his office as he sat there watching the sunset. He was aware of the Hokage's constant partiality for the blonde, but he had a point. He missed the test's entire purpose because he was too preoccupied with passing it and strengthening himself to defeat his brother Itachi, who had massacred his entire clan. Even though his teammate was just 2 or 3 feet ahead of him, he hadn't helped. Had he really neglected his teammates because he was so focused on trying to impress and defeat Kakashi? They were unwieldy and weak, to be sure, but still. Then Sakura appeared. She claimed that in an effort to fulfill her dream, she had tried to murder Naruto. She was a fangirl, definitely, but she went too far. Was she truly so insanely driven to fulfill her own ambitions that she would murder her own teammate to do so? Hell, would Sasuke follow suit? He didn't know he was in dire need of power, the ability to murder his brother, on the one hand. However, was Sasuke truly willing to go to the same lengths as his brother or teammate in order to achieve his goals? Could he really justify his retaliation by killing a comrade? He was not pleased with his response. He understood that his response would have been yes prior to all of this. If he could have the ability to kill Itachi, he would even sell his soul. He understood now that if he did, he would be just like Sakura or Itachi. If he followed their path, he would be discarding everything and unable to accomplish anything else. In addition, if he went off to kill his brother, he would never be able to accomplish his other objective. Sasuke was aware that his brother had warned him that he would have to despise Itachi in order to murder him. He was aware of that, but he also understood that his brother was superior to him in every manner. Hell, Sasuke hadn't even used his Sharingan yet, and his brother still possessed the Mangekyo Sharingan, a more advanced version of it. But he needed to kill his best friend to activate that level. Was Sasuke truly interested in having power at that cost? He came to the realization that he didn't if he could avoid it. He didn't want to become like his brother. Power would come to him in another form. He would never gain power by taking his brother's route. He wouldn't become like Sakura and murder a friend merely to realize a fantasy. He glanced down at his reflection, which momentarily resembled Itachi. After scowling, he threw a rock to cause the reflection to ripple. Oni-san, I will never use your tactics. Sasuke reflected. I'll get stronger in another way. I will never kill other ninjas for the sake of power. I swear now that I am a Uchiha. When Shibi Aburame arrived at his clan compound, his son was already there. He was aware that his son was thinking about something since he told Shino he would be late. Hello, Shino. Odo-san, may we please talk somewhere more private? I have a few questions for you. Shibi thought, short and to the point, just like his mother was before she passed away. The 2 Aburame arrived at the office and took a seat after hearing the words, very well, step into my office. Shino ended up sitting in a chair across from his father, while Shibi occupied his chair. Odo-san, I am sure that you are aware of the circumstances concerning my team. How'd I know, you ask? I was there when the Hokage left with Team 7 and Kurenai-sensei. Yes, I am aware of the circumstances you are referring to, at least partially. I was not told why Uzumaki-san was removed from Team 7, only that he would be safer with your team. This caught Shibi a little off guard, but he reasoned that it didn't really matter if his son was smart enough to figure it out or if Naruto himself told him. He was attacked by another of his teammates, Oto-san again. I was witness to this myself unfortunately. This is not what I wish to discuss. What may I wish to speak of? I wish to talk to you about Naruto and the nine-tailed fox? After Shino acknowledged with a nod, Shibi inquired as to what Shino was interested in. I assume that Naruto told you, and that you are aware of the laws surrounding him? Shibi sighed, knowing that Shino would not give up until he had an answer. Oto-san, I know that most clans tend to place distance from him, but I am curious as to why we do so. Naruto, perhaps more than most, understands what it is like to have something inside of him that is placed inside of him. How could we not be more supportive of him? Shibi asked so that he could collect his thoughts. He asked Shino to remain silent until he finished his drawn-out explanation. Shino, I believe you are partially misinformed. We have always tried to support Naruto. At one point, I even tried to adopt him. He could have been your brother. Unfortunately, there were two things stopping me. One, the demonic chakra that flows through him would not have been compatible with our insects. We would have lost many of our colonies if we attempted to adopt him. Secondly, the High Council felt that allowing him to be adopted by a major clan would have given that clan too much power. Nevertheless, we have done our best to try and support him in whatever way we can. Were you aware that the account that Naruto had to rely on when he received his apartment was funded by us? Probably not. Thankfully, we have only ever had one Aburame that was ever against Naruto. Do you remember your relative Torune? Shino gave a nod. Yes, he was the member with the nano-sized insects, correct? Correct. At any rate, he used to be a Jonin of our clan, and he even made his way into Anbu. That was up until 7 years ago. One day, he was on patrol and came across Naruto Uzumaki in the village. He used his insects to try and harm Naruto. He was caught before he could do serious harm, but the attack left a scar on Uzumaki-san's left shoulder. Soon after the attack, our clan formulated a formal apology, and then we banished Torune. That is the only time anyone of our clan had ever been against Uzumaki-san. Shino was taken aback. Before he had even entered the academy, one of his comrades had been attacked by his own relative. Shino felt guilty about it, but he understood that Naruto was either trying to be nice or didn't know his clan was involved. Thank you, Oto-san. I was worried that our clan may have been against Naruto. It is all right, Shino. If it is any consolation, I did want to have you get close to him as a friend, but I figured you took after me when it comes to social situations. Sorry for not allowing you to spend more time trying to become his friend. With that, Shino left his dad's office to try to sleep, though he wasn't sure he could give in everything he had learned that day. It is all right if there is nothing else. I think I will retire for the evening. Good night, Oto-san. As Kiba entered the compound where his family lived, he asked his sister Hana where his mother was. He wasn't in the mood to wait, and he needed to ask her some questions. Kiba sent Akamaru to his room to sleep while he spoke with his Okawa-san. After Hana informed him that she was in her room shuddering at the thought of what had happened to him the last time he had forgotten to knock, he went to her room and knocked. He saw far more of his mother than he ever would have liked to put it mildly. With her dog, Kuromaru, who has an eye patch and a missing ear, by her side, Sume answered the door. Something you need, pup? Okawa-san, I need to talk to you, in private, Kiba replied, taking a cue. Sume told Kuromaru he could go to bed for the night. He said, yes, Sume-chan, and walked away. Sume then gestured for Kiba to enter the room and take a seat on the bed. Okay, Kiba, what do you need? Before he started, Kiba remained quiet. Okawa-san, I know about the fox inside Naruto. Sume let out a gasp. Kiba knew that someone had made a huge mistake. Who told you? Naruto himself did, Kiba remarked impatiently. Look, I don't really care about him having that thing inside of him, but I do have some questions. I know you usually stopped us from hanging out with each other when I was younger. I want to know if it had to do with the fox. I want to know if you were any different from everyone else that ignored him. Kiba was almost yelling toward the end. Sume sighed deeply, both relieved that Hiruzen's law had not yet been broken and annoyed at having to defend her behavior to her own son. Kiba, you wouldn't understand. Kiba practically challenged his mother, saying, that is complete BS, try me, unless you want me to think you have something to hide. Look, Kiba, it's nothing like that. Look, I had complete faith in the seal that the fourth used to seal the fox inside of him. What had me worried was just how much influence the fox had on Naruto. Try to understand, Kiba, the fourth Hokage was a seal expert, but the rest of us have absolutely just how much exactly the fox influenced him. We were told that Naruto would have access to its chakra, but we were not told if the fox could take control. Sume then broke down in tears. Kiba, did you know that the Kyuubi no Yoko killed your father? Kiba gave a head nod. From an early age, he had been informed that his father had died in an attempt to buy time while the fourth Hokage developed the seal, Well, that is what had me nervous. I know he is not the fox, but I didn't want to risk that the damn demon would possess the Gaki and kill you. I already lost one member of my family to that monster. I didn't want to risk losing you too. She then continued to cry. Kiba said, Okawa-san, with a hint of despair, look, I'm sorry that I kept him away from you, Kiba, but I was scared. It wasn't until I was told that he was gonna be a genin that I began to stop worrying. After all, if he will be trusted to be able to be a ninja, he is okay. In my book that said, I do not regret my actions at the time. Kiba, my fears were very real to me, and I care too much about you to let you slip away from me too. Look, began Kiba. I get you were right about that, Okawa-san, but if you knew he was not the fox and still treated him like that, then perhaps you had less faith in your cage than you thought. I hope you truly mean what you say, because he is not only a teammate, he is also a friend. With that, Kiba wrapped his arms around Sume and to bed. Hinata, Hiyashi, and another Hyuga council member were in the middle of a meeting. She was aware that Naruto would be the topic of this meeting. She had no idea how her father felt about it, but she hoped he would dismiss it as just another case of indifference. She was there primarily for her own information and not to converse, so she knew she couldn't ask any questions. Hiyashi-sama, do you really think it wise to allow your daughter to be associated with that Uzumaki brat? I mean, he is a pariah. The older man yelled, not to mention the duh. Hiyashi interrupted him before he broke the law, saying, Now San, I do not think it will sully our name to be associated with him any more than having a weak heir. Trying to come up with a cover story for Hinata was the last thing he needed at the moment. In addition, an elder who violates the law will have to be put to death, but he was taken aback when his oldest daughter spoke out of turn. Hiyashi was a little taken aback by this, but he chose to find out how much his oldest knew. Father, I am already aware of the Keikyubi inside of Naruto-kun. How do you know, Hinata? Naruto-kun told our team today. And you are fine with this? Yes, father, Hinata said in an attempt to clarify. I know he is not the Fox Inc. incarnate, since he has two types of CHCH chakra. Now inquired, and you are both alright with this? As long as he doesn't embarrass us, I could care less. Now bowed and said, as you wish, Hiyashi-sama, before walking away. Following his departure, Hinata made an effort to regulate her breathing in order to speak to her father less stutteringly. Father. I have a feeling that everyone in the clan knows about Naruto-kun. If the entire clan knows the difference between Naruto's prisoner and him, why do we not want anything to do with him? Hiyashi clarified, in all honesty, Hinata, it is because he is an outcast. He would sully our name with his brashness and his way of life. He is simply not up to our clan's standards. That made some sense, Hinata thought, but she didn't like it. Nevertheless, she was confident that her father would act in the clan's best interests, so she just thanked him and went to bed without trying to get more information. Hiyashi grinned a little as she walked away. Prior to this, Hinata would never have dared to speak out of turn or try to inquire about the clan's workings. Although Hiyashi still did not want to be associated with the boy, he could tolerate occasional embarrassment if he assisted his daughter. This might be beneficial to her. Time will tell, Hiyashi pondered. Inoichi Yamanaka wasn't feeling very good. He was sitting with his friend and fellow interrogator, Ibiki Morino, after concluding his dive into the mind of one Sakura Haruno. Well, that was enlightening. Ibiki inquired, what would that be, Inoichi-san? Inoichi started to say, well, it seems that the Haruno girl was telling the truth. Whether they were truly the honorable elders or someone under a transformation, I can't tell. The fact is, someone could have changed into them, and she would never have known. Plus, they were in a dark room, so a visual confirmation is near impossible with no paper trail, no other collaborating witnesses, and no other evidence to connect either Kaharu or Homura to this. It means that we have little in proof concerning the deal, the meeting, everything. That is just perfect. We got those two going after one lone genin and virtually no way to prove it. The Hokage isn't going to like this, Ibiki said. No, he won't. Here's the curious thing, though, she seemed to have a strong disliking for Naruto, but she never wanted him dead somehow. She wanted him gone, but not dead. However, regardless, all we have right now is her memories and word, which is not enough to get the counselors arrested. True, but it does have us keep our eyes out for someone. What about the girl? Inoichi positioned himself thoughtfully before responding. All things considered, she isn't really a threat to anyone other than Naruto right now. She is sorry for what she did, and it seems she was manipulated into doing what she did. All I can say with any absolute certainty is that she is not fully responsible for her actions. Still, she is a threat to Naruto, so for now, we will have to go with the Hokage's ruling. Well, Ibiki replied, I suppose we should just keep her here for tonight and simply wait until tomorrow to report to the Hokage. Why don't you head home, Inoichi? Celebrate your daughter's promotion and we can report tomorrow morning. Inoichi said, thanks, Ibiki, I will have a good evening, and headed home in the hopes that tomorrow would bring better news. The following morning, at 7 a.m., the Hokage was seated at his desk. Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Morino, his top interrogators, were standing directly across from him. Inoichi, a 38-year-old village jonin, was initially well known for being a member of the renowned group Ino Shikacho. With the exception of a pale lavender hite on his forehead, arm guards on each arm, and a red jacket over his vest, he was primarily dressed in the uniform of his rank. He wore his hair down to his lower back in a long, blonde ponytail. Ibiki Morino was seated directly across from him in the village. Ibiki was a man of considerable psychological strength. He was Tokubetsu Jonin, the highest-ranking interrogator in Anbu. He covered the mass of scars on his body with a black trench coat, black combat boots, and a bandana with the metal plate that is typically seen on a typical Hite 8. The elderly man inquired, "So, what is the verdict on Haruno-san?" "Well, we interrogated her and found that she was indeed telling the truth, Hokage-sama," Ibiki stated. "However, without anything other than her testimony, I doubt that we will be able to get any sort of conviction based solely on the testimony of one genin, especially one that attacked her comrade. Unfortunately, Hokage-sama, I must agree with Ibiki-san on this one. Without some form of collaborating evidence against either Homura-sama or Kaharu-sama, all we have is Sakura's word," Inoichi continued. In all honesty, he felt conflicted about Sakura's actions, not because of Naruto, but rather because Sakura was once his daughter's closest confidant. After he got home, he recalled telling Ino about it, omitting the case's details except to mention that she had viciously attacked her teammate. It goes without saying that Ino was stunned because of their competition for a certain Uchiha's affections. She and the Pinkette may no longer be friends, but it's not often that you hear about a former classmate being questioned by Anbu. With that said, Hokage-sama, what are your orders? Hiruzen was lost in contemplation. This entire situation was a colossal waste of time. He had too many gaps to fill, too little evidence to convict his former teammates of any wrongdoing, and the only credible witness to their involvement was a nameless civilian-raised genin who would have faced murder charges had Naruto died. He was determined to see justice done for the young Uzumaki, but he was limited in what he could do in the absence of concrete evidence of a conspiracy. Additionally, Hiruzen couldn't afford to focus even more on a case that was unlikely to be resolved anytime soon given the reports of trouble involving his former student Orochimaru of the Sannin and the missing sightings of multiple S-ranked criminals. Hiruzen issued his orders with sorrow in his heart. Without a solid case against them, we cannot do much. I am sorry to say that we will have to put this on the back burner until we have more evidence against them. Sakura has been dealt with, and if they are involved, they will know that and hopefully lay low for a while. For now, however, we will have to keep this hush-hush. If they think we are pressing a case, they may destroy evidence or try to concoct a story to cover their trail. I want someone to keep an eye open, but unless something becomes obvious, we downplay this as a freak incident. Am I clear? They both said, "Hi." Ibiki and Inoichi the Hokage had a point, but they didn't like it. Therefore, it was decided to minimize the incident for the time being while keeping the case open in case more information became available. On his way to the training grounds, Kakashi was strolling through Konaha's early morning streets. Because of what had happened the day before, he wanted to get to his team, in this case, Sasuke, on time rather than make them wait for hours to allow him to visit the memorial stone honoring his sensei and fallen comrades. Although Sakura was still officially under Anbu custody, Kakashi learned from some of his old Anbu co-workers that Sakura was scheduled to be released that afternoon or the following day. This was good because it might finally allow Kakashi to begin team-building activities, which he felt were desperately needed, but it was also bad because it would require more work to try and fix his team's mistakes more quickly. The night before, Kakashi had a long night. Two other Jonin who had genin teams this year, Asuma Sarutobi and Maeda Guy, had met up with him. They had inquired about what had transpired after noticing that Kakashi was not acting like himself the night before. Kakashi continued by telling his team what had transpired. Asuma and Guy were both taken aback by Sakura's behavior and Kakashi's carelessness. Although they were a little tempted to say, "I told you so," they decided that the situation was already dire enough. Following a lengthy debate, they both agreed that the entire situation was the result of a mix of bad judgment and insane genin mindsets. After deciding he had heard enough, Kakashi went to try to sleep that night, which is how this morning came to be. Kakashi let out a sigh with the news of his incident involving the former Team 7 starting to spread throughout the ranks. Things were already going to get bad enough for him. This was going to take a very long time. The final Hitaki thought to himself, "Let's hope I survive long enough to make it that far, anyway." Naruto turned his attention to the clock across his bed. The time on the device was 9:30. The staff stated that he would be eligible for release at 12 o'clock that afternoon. For him, time seemed to move very slowly thus far. He has received visits from a frantic Iruka Amino, who was relieved that Naruto was alright, and a distressed Konohamaru Sarutobi, who believed his most recent opponent for the Hokage position had passed away. Don't worry, Naruto had assured them both that he was okay and had been patient with them. He had enough people breathing down his neck, so he didn't exactly want to tell them what had happened, mainly because he believed they already knew. Another knock on his door jolted him out of his reverie. Naruto shouted, "The door's open, you know?" Team 10 entered. As the door opened, Shikamaru and Choji went in first, then their blonde teammate and their sensei. Asuma Sarutobi resembled the third Hokage. When he was younger he had brown eyes, jet black hair, and a black beard. In addition to his blue Hite and other typical ninja gear, he wore a sash and a pair of bracelets from his time as a member of the 12 Guardian Ninjas, a group of shinobi who devoted their lives to protecting the fire daimyo. He would typically be seen smoking a cigarette, but since he was in a hospital and didn't want the staff to be upset, he abstained from smoking. Team 10's female member was Ino Yamanaka. Her sky blue eyes stood out against her long cornflower blonde hair, which was a bang that covered one side of her face. She covered most of her body with bandages, especially around her legs and waist, and wore a purple dress as part of her uniform. She wore her blue Hite around her waist like a belt and what looked like cloth arm guards. All four of Team 10 entered and gathered around Naruto's bed. Choji inquired, "So, Naruto, how are you feeling? You know, all things considered." "Well, it could be worse, I suppose," told Naruto. "I could have actually died seriously. You'd think I had just fought against an S-rank criminal and lost or something. So, what brings you guys here?" Shikamaru asked his blonde friend. As troublesome as it is, we wanted to make sure you were still alive, numbskull. So, are you holding up okay?" Trying to be as insensitive as possible for once, Ino remarked. "Yeah, it must kinda suck to have your crush. Well, you know." "Yeah, I'll be okay. The whole, 'I'm gonna kill you' thing though makes me not want to date her, though, Dadbeo," laughed Naruto. The other people in the room appeared to relax a little. At least Naruto's sense of humor appeared to be unaffected by the incident, which was encouraging. After spending roughly an hour with Naruto, Team 10 was escorted out by Asuma. Shikamaru just gave him a handshake. Asuma merely informed him that Naruto could look him up and ask Asuma for assistance if he ever needed it, and Choji left a bag of chips for him. To everyone's surprise, Ino approached Naruto as they were leaving and gave him a quick embrace. "You know, I'm still a little mad about you taking Sasuke-kun's first kiss, Naruto, but, for all that it's worth, I'm glad you're okay." Thanks, Ino," Naruto said, his expression startled. Typically, he was shunned by most girls, so to be hugged by two of them in 24 hours. Well, let's just say that Naruto was experiencing one of those moments where you question whether you woke up in the correct dimension. Naruto was beginning to get on board in anticipation of his new team after they had departed. He reasoned that the elderly man was most likely preventing Team 7 from entering for his own protection. Although he assumed that was understandable, Naruto didn't feel particularly threatened by them. He reasoned that the elderly man was most likely concerned that someone would try to do what Sakura had done. Naruto made an effort not to dwell on the events of the previous day. He had been trying to figure out what had happened to him for the majority of last night. He reached three conclusions. 1. In his opinion, Kakashi had done nothing wrong. He issued an order that was meant to be obeyed. How could they have known it was a test as well? 2. Despite his intense hatred for Sasuke, he didn't actually do anything wrong. 3. At the moment, he wasn't Sakura's biggest admirer. She had tried to kill him and betrayed him. Any romantic feelings, or delusions, depending on your point of view, he may have had for the pink-haired genin vanished with that attack. Kurenai, Hinata, Shino, and Kiba arrived at the hospital to pick up their new teammate after they had waited for another hour and a half and had been checked by the nurses to make sure he hadn't passed away while they were asleep. Kurenai made the decision to try to get Naruto a new shinobi outfit after he was checked out and make sure he had everything he would need for training. Kurenai made the decision to try to get Naruto ready and just use this time to get to know each other better because the doctors had advised him to postpone training until at least the following day. Naruto first objected, claiming he already had what he needed, but Kurenai persisted, and he eventually consented to the brief shopping excursion. She was intrigued and took note of the neon orange jumpsuit he frequently wore. At that point it might have been his favorite color, she thought, but this was going a bit far. When she proposed replacing it with a more suitable wardrobe, he appeared a little uneasy, but she persuaded him that it would benefit him in the long run. It would be interesting to know how he could have believed that his attire would be even close to what a shinobi would wear in the field, she thought. Fortunately for her, Kiba made the decision to pop the question. "You know, Naruto, I wanted to know this for a while. Why do you wear that idiotic outfit of yours?" Naruto questioned. What's wrong with it?" as though the outfit he was wearing was normal for someone who had been taught to kill you in 100 different ways. "Dude, your outfit is a neon orange jumpsuit, it screams. Here I am. Now, roast my ass on an open fire and use me as a living target." Shino interrupted Naruto before he could bark back. When Naruto heard that, any kind of retort died in his throat. "I must agree with Kiba-san. Naruto-san, why, do you ask? Because there is no way you would be able to sneak around and practice stealth in a suit that is easier to spot out in a crowd than a blue butterfly in a field of moths." Fortunately, Team 8 had reached a nearby shinobi store that provided clothing and gear for the village's shinobi forces before he could respond. I'm not sure I should go in there, guys, I don't have any money on me, and well, this place is kinda expensive." Naruto began to walk away on the inside. He didn't want his team to see directly the treatment he received from the other residents of the village. Hearing about the Kyuubi's disregard for him was one thing, but witnessing the hatred on the faces of everyone he passed was quite another. The other four regarded Naruto with amusement. "Naruto, what are you talking about? This place has the best prices in town on stuff," Kiba responded. "Well, when I was in the academy, I couldn't afford new stuff most of the time because I still had to eat, so I never came here because everything here was so darn expensive. That, and like I said, I can't really afford anything in here." "Why?" His new pals and sensei were somewhat startled. Did Naruto have to decide between supplies, clothing, and food? Where was he getting used to anything, anyway? Except for gathering them up after a training session or melting the pieces down and reforging material. Recycling the majority of ninja tools was regarded as a safety hazard if someone wasn't careful. Used equipment had a tendency to shatter and break, which could result in injuries in the field. The thought of Naruto having to choose between eating and meeting his most basic needs as a child devastated Hinata. Although she was better off than most, she couldn't even begin to imagine what it would have been like to be forced to live that way. Shino and Kiba were still processing the idea of someone denying a student of the academy access to ninja weapons and food that would be insignificant to most people. Kurenai felt bewildered and worried that Naruto was given inferior equipment when he ought to have had enough money for everything, and perplexed by Naruto's claim that he had to make decisions most of the time. She knew that the Hokage had given him an orphan allowance prior to the academy, and she was positive that it should have been sufficient to cover all of his expenses. Is it possible that the fox was causing the village to overcharge him? She chose to see how much Naruto was spending on his necessities because there was only one way to find out. "Naruto, how much do you usually pay on a typical set of kunai?" asked Kurenai. Naruto considered it. Naruto said, "Well, if I can get it used, I can get a set for about 5,000 ryo, otherwise, I have to spend 7,500 ryo on a new set," as if he were describing his preferred ramen flavor. The others were staring at him strangely after he said that, as if he had grown a second head or something. He was a little perplexed and a little afraid that he had said something incorrectly. "What, did I say something?" In an attempt to avoid further embarrassing Naruto, Hinata timidly questioned, "And Naruto-kun, why, you are aware that a typical set of kunai C costs only about 1,500 ryo, right?" It was immediately apparent to her that he was uncomfortable with money, or the lack of it. Naruto let out a sigh. He wasn't exactly looking for sympathy, but he understood that he wouldn't have much control over how people responded if he were on a team with people who could easily find answers if they needed to. Although most people wouldn't describe his life as great, he learned to accept it for what it was. Long ago he would accept things as they are, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try his best to change that. Regretfully, it appeared that they would not allow him to escape punishment. In order to retrieve his belongings, he allowed them to drag him into the store. The clerk behind the counter chimed the standard greeting of most store owners as soon as the customer entered. When the clerk realized who she was speaking to, she paused. "Hello. Welcome to our shop, feel free to." Her expression seemed to be one of hatred, like the warmth that a fire gives off. Not knowing exactly how the woman would respond now that she had seen Naruto, Team 8 was on edge. Kurenai asked naively, "Is there a problem, miss?" While quietly remaining vigilant. Even though her team was aware of the fox, she would still enforce the third's law if necessary. The store employee merely put on a false apology and carefully crafted her next statement to avoid breaking the law while still being offensive enough to meet her needs. "Oh, I'm sorry, Ninja-san, but we only serve humans in this shop. I will gladly serve you for, but she said, gesturing to Naruto, "will have to go elsewhere." She finished the act with a phony smile that was as blatantly phony as the health benefits of ramen. Kurenai held up her hand to stop Naruto from suggesting that they try another store. "You are aware he is a shinobi of Konaha, correct? He is nothing but a monster, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone I wish. Now, please leave." Hinata nodded as she turned to face Kiba and Shino. "Well, if that's the CC case, I might as well tell my clan that we Hyuga are no longer welcome at this establishment. I suppose Mom will be a little ticked, but we Inuzuka can manage, I guess. I suppose the Aburame might as well withdraw as well. Why, do you ask? Simple, you are obviously refusing service to the clan heirs of the Aburame and Hyuga clan, as well as the son of the Inuzuka matriarch. That clearly shows that you do not want any of our business. The proprietor of the store blanched. Although it might have been difficult to lose the business of one of those clans, the Aburame, Hyuga, and Inuzuka had emerged as Konaha's three most powerful clans ever since the Uchiha were wiped out. Refusing to serve them was a political and economic suicide. The store would be in danger if word spread that they were turned away. Naruto was still insistent that he couldn't pay for anything, but Kurenai said that she would be purchasing everything, just for this one time. The clerk apologized quickly, obviously to save face, and permitted the demon brat to receive regular service. As Kurenai selected his ninja gear, Naruto, Hinata, Kiba, and Shino went to the racks to collect some clothing for a new wardrobe. To his delight, Naruto eventually received a few t-shirts in a variety of patterns and hues, such as burnt orange, black, and blue. In addition to a dark blue coat with a thin hood and a mesh inner lining that served as armor, he was given multiple pairs of dark green, black, and brown shinobi pants. He also received a pair of black shinobi sandals, a gray coat that resembled the blue one, and a pair of black fingerless gloves with the Konaha insignia on each metal plate on each hand. All in all, it was a significant improvement over his previous attire. Naruto made the decision to pause and express gratitude to his team as they were heading out of the store for the evening. Guys, thanks so much for all this. I promise, I will find a way to pay you all back. In shock, everyone turned to Kurenai and said, "Stop right there, Naruto. I already told you. I chose to pay for this. It is my way of helping you become a better shinobi. You deserve to be treated better than you are now. Naruto, if we can help it, we will find a way to start helping you more. Isn't that right, team?" "That is correct, Naruto-san," Shino stated. "We are ninja now. For you to continue to be treated like you were in the academy is unacceptable. We are more than your teammates. We are your friends. As your friends, we will do what we can to make sure that we won't have a repeat of what happened today. Being denied your most basic rights is unethical and unacceptable." "Yeah, Dobi," said Kiba as his dog barked in agreement. Kiba concluded with a savage grin. "Besides, if this means your ass doesn't get spotted in the field or force your opponent to die of laughing too hard, I think we can stand to do some roughing up once in a while, right, Akamaru?" Even though it sounded like a total insult, Naruto knew Kiba long enough to know that he was sincere. Besides, Naruto-kun, why you shouldn't have to hold all of your burdens by yourself anymore." Hinata began to walk away. Naruto's smile was sincere. These four individuals were willing to defend him in addition to acknowledging him. That was something he had never experienced before, and he was relishing every second of it. After expressing gratitude to his sensei and all of his new friends, he made the decision to spend the night at home. He knew that tomorrow would mark the beginning of something great, or at least better than it had been for him thus far, when he could begin training with his new team. Chiyoko smiled as she watched the blonde from her spot in the sky. "Naruto, you are definitely headed in the right direction. We'll now see if the relationships you form can support you as you move forward." 2 months had passed since Naruto's altercation with his former teammates, and Kurenai was still grinning. When Naruto first started, things had been difficult, mostly because he needed a lot of corrections. In that sense, his shadow clone jutsu was a godsend. Using the clones allowed for the refinement of a taijutsu kata that would have taken months to master to be completed in a matter of days. Naruto practically instantly started incorporating the technique into his training regimen after she had gone over its advantages and disadvantages with him. Kurenai was astounded by how many he could produce. Naruto could essentially build an entire army without exerting much effort, whereas even a Hokage could only do 2 or 3 at a time if they didn't want to exhaust themselves. He was a one-trick pony, to be sure, but Kurenai wanted him to master the fundamentals before giving him something more complex, even though she believed he could likely master any high-level technique as easily as a basic. The application of the standard clone technique was the only method she didn't have him practice. Although there were advantages for those who could handle it, his superior cloning technique and his reserves made it impossible for him to use the technique effectively without practically exhausting himself. Additionally, Kurenai worked on Naruto's habits. Although he still tended to rush things and was generally hyperactive, Kurenai had worked with Naruto early on to help him learn patience. Early on, she learned that Naruto was the kind of person who would get killed in the field because he was the type to jump right in and figure things out later. She therefore worked with him to learn to listen as much as he spoke and to pause and consider his actions. At first, it was painful and slow, but she had managed to get him to stop yelling at her every 5 minutes about how bored he was with theory lessons or mission explanations. She thought that having that much power was at least something to be grateful for. Kurenai was also pleased with Naruto's progress in collaborating with his teammates. The blonde genin had benefited greatly from his early acceptance into the group. He had previously been a fairly open individual, but his team was gradually revealing the Naruto that the outside world typically did not see. He still had a lot of secrets, as the entire team could see. The one about the Kyuubi had already taken a lot of courage, but so did the others. Naruto was starting to open up, though it took some time, and he was starting to trust his team more with his burdens. Although he still felt a little awkward talking about his early years, his team respected him enough to not press him when they could tell he was uncomfortable. He also began to establish himself as a vital team player. Shino was more talkative, well, as talkative as an Aburame could get. Because of him, Naruto benefited greatly from Kiba's excellent sparring partner and rival, as he needed someone to spar with who didn't mind scrapping from time to time. Hinata had even started to control her stuttering. She was not nearly as shy as she had been in the academy, though she was still a little shy all things considered. Kurenai is extremely pleased with their development. At the moment, she was in the Sandaime Hokage's office with her team. Her team was waiting to find out what missions they had to complete for the day at around 10 in the morning. Kurenai observed over the last few months that each team member appeared to be capable of performing better on some missions than others. Hinata struggled to manage big crowds of people or animals, but she seemed to be naturally good at gardening and babysitting. Shino was good at gardening as well, but he typically frightened young children. Most missions involving pets or dogs benefited from Kiba's relationships with dogs, but occasionally things were challenging due to his short fuse when it came to capturing Tora or handling unruly kids. Lastly, Naruto appeared to be very good at painting, probably because he had experience playing practical jokes, caring for plants, and, much to everyone's surprise, watching children. Kurenai attributed the last one to usually having to deal with Konohamaru and reasoned that his time spent as an orphan had given him a better understanding of what a child would typically desire. But he detested pet sitting for some reason, and he detested it when it came to finding Tora. The fact that the daimyo's stray cat would frequently attack his face like a scratching post probably didn't help either. Kurenai glanced at her students to observe the bored expressions on their faces as Iruka read out the list of missions to complete. Shino slouched just enough to convey his lack of interest in the proceedings. Only when she was merely trying to get through a meeting did Hinata put on her best impression of the standard Hyuga mask. Kiba was focusing on Akamaru and utterly disregarding Iruka. The elderly man noticed that Naruto was just staring at him with a bored expression before speaking to Naruto. Hiruzen motioned for Iruka to pause. He was aware that Naruto was typically the one to speak up for the group's better interests. Naruto, you have been unusually quiet. Is something on your team's mind? Naruto let out a sigh. His training under Kurenai had taught him that sometimes waiting and gathering your thoughts could help you win your argument, especially if you had the right support for it. Normally, he would have just blurted out his opinion. Well, Gigi, I just think that we are all getting bored of doing the same D-rank missions over and over again. Naruto, Iruka said, we've been through this before. Newly minted genin are usually given D-rank missions for the first 5 or 6 months to give them some experience inside the safe environment of the village before entering the field. Anything higher would be overwhelming and would run the risk that you would not be able to handle the risks involved. The chance of injury or death is substantial for newly minted shinobi. But Iruka-sensei, wouldn't it be difficult to be able to tell how we would perform in the field if the only experience we have is in the village? How the hell does that work? Don't get me wrong, I enjoy getting my paycheck as much as everyone else does, but it's not like we're asking for an A-rank mission or anything. Naruto attempted to convey in order to convey a statement. Shino moved forward to support Naruto. Naruto-san does make an excellent point. What is that, you ask? The point being that we can never truly know just what we are capable of until we experience things for ourselves logically. At some point we would have to expand our horizons, not to mention, we have already completed 22 D-ranked missions already as a team. Kiba added his 2 Ryo because he didn't want to be excluded. Yeah, besides, if we have to chase that damn cat one more time, I'm gonna end up bringing my mom a brown-furred cat-shaped pelt home, right, Akamaru? His companion replied with a yipped grin. Under everyone's scrutiny, apparently expecting her to say something, Hinata finally spoke up. I believe we can handle an S slightly higher mission. We can only truly know if we try. A, and if worse comes to worse, W, we will only be able to learn from it. W, we have come far as a team over the past 2 months or so, and our skills have improved. Hokage-sama, she said as she went on. Iruka looked at the Hokage inquisitively, as though seeking some kind of justification for keeping Team 8 in the village. Hiruzen, for his part, closed his eyes in contemplation. On the one hand, allowing Naruto to leave the village might be problematic because of the potential for encountering someone like Orochimaru or something similar. Hiruzen was aware that if someone discovered that Naruto was the Kyuubi no Yoko's Jinchuriki, someone would try to kill him or take him to use as a weapon in order to prevent Konaha from using him again. However, he was powerless to stop Naruto from going forever. Naruto would have to face the challenges of the outside world as a shinobi under his command. Furthermore, his team did make a valid point. Their ability to work as a team was praised by everyone who hired them, according to almost all of the comments he had heard about the team. But in the end, he was aware that Kurenai had the final say over whether or not they were prepared. The professor asked the Jonin, "Kurenai-san, do you feel that your team is ready for a higher ranked mission?" Kuriani noticed the resolute expressions in her team's eyes. She paused to observe their defeated stance before continuing, saying, "Honestly, Hokage-sama, I feel that they are not ready for a high-ranking mission." She expressed her satisfaction with her team's apparent silent "thank you" for their support, saying, "That being said, I believe they could at least handle a C-rank mission. It would do all four of them some good to actually get some hands-on experience in the field, rather than trying to create those scenarios inside the village." According to the god of shinobi, "Well, if you are sure then Kurenai, let us see what we have." Hiruzen then went ahead and perused a number of scrolls on his desk before deciding on one. "Oh, this one should suffice. It is a C rank outside of Fire Country, and simple enough that you should be able to complete it in about a week or two, depending on how fast you go." Hiruzen then went on to present a map of all the elemental countries to Team 8. He indicated a peninsula that separated the land with Takigakure no Sato, a smaller village affiliated with Konaha, from Ta no Kuni. This is the Gufu Peninsula. Mostly, it is a temperate climate, mostly filled with evergreen trees and mountains in the middle. Don't worry, the mountains only reach about 7,000 feet or so. It rains a lot, but there isn't truly much to worry about. In addition to that, there are miles of coastline, ideal for ports and such. Rumors amongst some of the traders that have been in Konaha lately are that there is a small town that is slowly being built along the coast. We wish to send out a small team to deliver an offer of alliance to this village. Due to the access to the ocean, we believe that obtaining an alliance could not only improve our economy, but give us access to a valuable seaport. Hiruzen informed Kurenai, "This is where the five of you will come in," while handing him another scroll. "I want the five of you to deliver this scroll, which contains your basic alliance papers, to this new village. I do not anticipate anything other than the usual riffraff that accompany these sorts of missions. Are there any questions?" The first to answer was Shino. "How long do you wish for negotiations to last, Hokage-sama?" "That is an excellent question, Shino-san. While you may not have to negotiate anything, as none of you are technically diplomats, I do not expect negotiations to last more than 2 or 3 days, 5 at the most." "Are there any laws that we need to be aware of, Hokage-sama?" "I do not believe that the laws would be dissimilar to those in Konaha that I am aware of, but thank you for bringing it up, Hinata-san." "Will we have to fight enemy ninjas?" "That is always a possibility, Kiba-san, but unless they are at your level, I would advise you attempt to avoid a confrontation. Remember, part of being a ninja is being able to know when to fight and when to retreat to fight another day." At last, Naruto posed the query that everyone had ostensibly forgotten or had no desire to ask. "What is the name of this village, Gigi?" "Ah, yes, I should probably tell you all which village to go to. Thank you for reminding me. Naruto, the name of the town is Jizen. Apparently it was named for the rather charitable nature of the townspeople to help wayward travelers." Hiruzen noticed that everyone appeared to understand things fairly well and looked to see if anyone else had any questions. Although the mission was not particularly challenging, Hiruzen thought it would be beneficial to provide the genin with some practical diplomatic experience. 5. Hi, Hokage-sama, statements were heard as each member bowed and turned to depart. "Now, if there is nothing else, I would like for the 5 of you to leave by this afternoon. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior." The 5 of them halted and turned around when someone said, "Oh, there is one last thing, Naruto." Before leaving the house, the blonde young man grinned and said, "Since you will be outside the village on a mission, I wanted to wish you a happy birthday while you were gone." Kurenai went outside and faced her team. "All right, you 4, listen up. I want you all to go home and pack. Just because the Hokage said we might only be gone for a week or 2 doesn't mean that things won't happen. I want you all to pack extra clothing, seeing as how it might rain. We won't be needing stealth necessarily for this mission, but I would ask for you not to wear something that will stand out. Take your full gear, weapons, first aid kits, and anything else you might need also, since we will be going along the coast. Bring your swimsuit. Who knows, it is still a bit warm yet and we could stop to swim somewhere, get something to eat. for we won't be stopping until this evening. Meet me at the north gate at 1:15. Any questions? The 4 genin nodded. Good. In that case, see you then. She then vanished into a whirlpool of leaves to prepare. Team 8 gathered at the north gate at 1:15 p.m. and set out for Jizen Gai. For his part, Naruto is overjoyed. He told his team about the fox, so they knew it was his birthday, but it felt even more special to hear someone wish him a happy birthday. Although Naruto's distaste for his own birthday had long been known, he still usually observed a small custom to mark the occasion, which typically involved Iruka or the Hokage visiting Ichiraku Ramen to enjoy a bowl of a special birthday ramen. Now, however, he would have the opportunity to travel this year. Even though he would be on a mission, it would be preferable to spending the entire day hiding out in his apartment while everyone else went to mourn the deceased. After all, Naruto felt a little uncomfortable celebrating his birth because it happened on a day of mourning. Despite his happiness, Naruto couldn't help but feel a little dejected. For his birthday, he genuinely only wanted one thing: knowledge. Since learning from Chiyoko that his mother was still alive, he had devoted the majority of his leisure time to learning as much as he could about his deceased mother. He was aware that asking the Hokage would be futile. Each time he did, Hiruzen would merely respond that he couldn't find out until he was a more skilled ninja. He attempted to search the library's archives for an Uzumaki, but nobody was listed there, or at least no one was well known. He tried to ask some of the older adults if they knew of another Uzumaki, but they all either gave him a funny look or couldn't remember anyone with that name. Although Naruto considered breaking into the private records, he reasoned that one visit to the Hokage's private rooms and almost getting caught would likely be enough for him for one lifetime. Nevertheless, he thought he should be content. He wouldn't spend his birthday mostly alone, at least not this year. At least he would be able to spend time with Hinata, Shino, Kiba, and Kurenai's sensei. At least he was thankful for that. He made the decision to talk to his teammates as the group started heading north, taking advantage of the trees as a faster way to move. Shino and Hinata merely nodded their heads when he asked, "So, who else is excited to be getting out of the village for a while?" Kiba chose to respond loudly. "Of course we are excited, Dobi. After all, it's not like we would have anything better to do back in the village, right?" "Sheesh, you don't have to make me sound like an idiot, Inu Teme. What did you just call me, dumbass? Can the both of you please calm down? There is no reason to be fighting right now." After Kiba said, "Oh, why don't you just stick a can of aerosol up your ass, bug boy?" Shino glared at him, making Kiba feel as though he was causing his own demise. "Anyways, what about you, Naruto? It must be hard having to work on your birthday." "Are you kidding? At least this way, I actually have some people to celebrate with," Naruto replied. Kiba hung his head in embarrassment at this. He didn't realize that Naruto typically celebrated his birthday alone, so it was a plus in and of itself to have someone to celebrate with. Naruto made the decision to attempt to speak with Kurenai after noticing that Kiba was at a loss for words. "So, sensei, are we going to get some training in on this mission?" Kurenai gave a small laugh. She knew that Naruto would want to find a way to train if there was one thing she could count on. When she saw his face light up at the suggestion, she smiled and said, "Well, I suppose it couldn't hurt. Tell you what, as soon as we cross the border, we will try a new chakra control exercise, one that you will be vital to your success later on as shinobi." It wasn't a jutsu, to be sure, but she could have them do worse. After that, the team carried on without any problems. 2 days later, Team 8 was discovered heading north toward the Gufu Peninsula's coast. They made the decision to spend the day near a small stream. "Alright, everyone, what I am going to teach you is a chakra control exercise that is similar to the tree walking exercise, but more difficult. For this, I am going to have to ask you to go and switch into your swimsuits, since I do not want you all to get your clothes wet. If it is not too much trouble, sensei, may I sit this out? I actually learned this at home soon after I learned to tree walk. How, do you ask? My family includes the exercise in our training in order to better care for our hives. Our insects may be robust, but drenching our colonies would be detrimental to our health." Kurenai did not say anything. She suspected that someone would have a good reason for not wanting to get wet. The other 3 genin and their sensei emerged from hiding after vanishing behind some trees to change. Kiba was wearing a pair of black swimming trunks with the leaf emblem stitched into them in white. Hinata emerged wearing a one-piece bathing suit with a diagonal stripe across the stomach that was primarily lavender in color. Kurenai was dressed in a black one-piece with a red and white stripe running the other way from Hinata's swimsuit stripes, but Naruto was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes of waiting, Hinata called out to him, "And Naruto-kun, are you alright? Is there a problem?" Naruto emerged from behind the tree wearing a pair of blue trunks with orange stripes along the sides and the Konaha swirl on the front of the left leg. "Nah, I'm fine. I just needed to find my trunks in all of my crap." Naruto said, however, he was strongly tempted to hide behind the tree after glancing at Hinata and Kurenai in their bathing suits. Even though they were modestly dressed in swimming suits, they still flaunted their bodies while trying to convince himself that he wasn't a pervert. Naruto secretly observed that Hinata was a bit more mature than the majority of the other girls his age. It was flattering for her, but not obscenely curvy like some of the women he saw when he modeled for his sexy technique. Aside from his inner perversions, the fact that he was still wearing the black muscle shirt he had been wearing underneath his clothes earlier raised some eyebrows. It was strange because everyone else, with the exception of Shino, had already changed, and they were aware that one of the main reasons they had put on their swimming gear in the first place was to avoid getting their clothes wet. Kurenai made the decision to ask Naruto directly what his reasoning was. Naruto appeared ready to object, but instead sighed and turned his head to the ground, avoiding eye contact. "You know, Naruto, it would probably be for the best to take your shirt off as well. I doubt any of us will think poorly of you, and we are trying to avoid getting our clothes wet." The team gave him a few curious looks as a result, and then he started removing the shirt. He had spun around and started removing the shirt. After taking it off, he threw it back at his pack, but not before the others gasped in surprise. The faded kana that formed the word murderer, as well as an odd scarring pattern on his left shoulder that at one point almost gave the impression that he had a terrible infection there, were scratched horizontally into his back. Naruto turned around and inhaled several more breaths. Two faint kanji, one for vile, and one for demon, emerged on his pectoral region as he did so, nearly embarrassed by what he had to show his team. Naruto turned to face them. Kiba appeared pale and on the verge of vomiting. Hinata appeared to be on the verge of tears, and Kurenai was trying, but finding it more and more difficult, to appear unconcerned for his part. Shino stayed silent except for what appeared to be a stray tear. "Naruto, I'm sorry, I didn't know," Naruto said. "It's okay. Sensei, not many do," before trying to inject some humor to lighten the depressing atmosphere. The statement, "Besides, these are old and it's not like this was a regular thing for me," turned out worse than Naruto had anticipated and only served to degrade everyone else's reputation. Sorry, crappy joke, Kiba said. "Naruto, dude, please tell me that those aren't a regular thing for you," in a tone that made it obvious how uneasy he felt about the situation. "What? No. Most of the time, I was ignored on my birthday. It's not like I had a mob of people chasing me down and trying to kill me on my birthday. Now, let's see, I got this one," he said while pointing to his back. "When I was 4, when one of the matrons at the orphanage decided to get a little tipsy and grabbed hold of a kitchen knife. This one," he kept on pointing to his shoulder, "I got from some idiot Anbu when I was 5, hurt like hell, too, and these one," he concluded while pointing to his pectorals, "I got when I was 6 apparently. Going to the memorial stone on one of Konaha's biggest days of mourning is an absolute no-no for the demon fox of Konaha." But, Naruto-kun," replied Hinata, "doesn't your healing factor prevent you from scarring?" As he responded, Naruto appeared to glance sideways. "Just because I heal fast, doesn't mean that I don't get scars. I just avoided injury most of the time. There is a difference between accelerated and complete healing, after all." Shino approached Naruto and bowed before anyone else could. Everyone, including Naruto, was perplexed by this until he started talking. "I sincerely apologize, Naruto-san. I believe the Anbu that gave you that scar on your shoulder was a former member of my clan. My father told me about how that member used nano-sized insects and that he was found responsible for the attack. That member was later banished for attacking you. Had I known that you were the victim, I would have tried harder to be a friend of yours at the academy. For that, I apologize." Naruto just dismissed it with a shrug. "It's not like you attacked me, Shino. I don't blame you for the attack. I am not one to just go blaming everyone for what they did to me. It doesn't change anything, and as long as something good comes out of it, I am fine. What good would it do me to just get angry about it, other than to become some brooding prick like Sasuke? Besides, I can always lie and say that it's a cool battle scar. So, don't worry so much, okay?" Kurenai grinned. It said volumes about Naruto's character that he appeared to be able to forgive a lot. She felt even more relieved when she saw how effectively he was able to resolve the situation. He might have been lying to save face, it's true, but Kurenai could tell he was sincere when he spoke. She was proud that he was acting at least somewhat responsibly, even though she knew there was likely more to it than what he had said. Before long, everyone had moved on and was anticipating Kurenai's lesson. They learned and generally enjoyed each other's company for the remainder of the day. Team 8 was spending the night in a small wooded clearing just off the main route to their destination on October 8th. To everyone's relief, they were expected to reach Jizen sometime tomorrow morning at the current pace of travel. Thus far, the team had been doing well. Kurenai was relieved that they had not yet encountered any enemy bandits or shinobi, that their supplies had been adequately prepared, and that the weather had not been too bad save for a little rain. The water walking exercise had also been started by all 4 genin, though Shino and Hinata appeared to be the only ones who had mastered it enough to be able to perform it with ease. Although they took the longest to learn how to walk trees, Kiba and Naruto appeared to have difficulties. Kiba and Naruto were working the night watch together, and it was getting close to midnight. After dinner last night, they agreed that Shino and Hinata would work the first shift, followed by Kiba and Naruto, and Kurenai would watch until the break of day. The 2 genin mostly just sat around the campfire in silence, attempting to stay warm. Since Naruto had dispatched his clones to patrol the area, Akamaru could sleep after a long day of traveling, and Kiba and Naruto did not have to concentrate as much on observing the surroundings. Kiba eventually got tired of just sitting there and watching the fire dance in the makeshift pit, so he started focusing on his teammate. The blonde's expression instantly caught his attention, indicating that he was thinking deeply about something, though it was unclear what. Over the years since Naruto joined Team 8, Kiba had observed that the hyperactive knucklehead had changed somewhat and that he had given much more thought to things that he might have otherwise disregarded. While they were all in the academy, Kiba decided to start a conversation about the evening's topic. "So, what's on your mind, Naruto?" Shaking his head, Naruto appeared to be removing cobwebs from his mind. "It's nothing." "Come on, man. I know that look. There's something on your mind." Naruto turned to face his friend who was obsessed with dogs. "Promise not to laugh." Kiba grinned ferociously. "Sure, what the hell?" With a sigh, Naruto started talking. "Well, as crazy as it sounds, I keep getting this weird feeling. You know how I have told you guys that I don't know what happened to my mom?" Then Naruto continued. "Well, for some reason, I keep getting this feeling that there might be something in this town we are going to that might be able to tell me where she might be. It's like, there is a voice telling me that the answers I seek are there. I have tried to convince myself that it's just me wishing that were the case, but that voice keeps nagging me and telling me she is closer than I think." It was supposed to be a joke, but judging by Naruto's frown, it came across as a bit more disbelieving than Kiba had intended. "So, you are saying that, in addition to a humongous fox demon that can destroy us all in your gut, you have a voice in your head saying that we are going to find out something about your family? Look, I was just messing with you, man. Seriously though, I don't think that is all that crazy." "You don't? Why is that?" Kiba gave a shoulder shrug. "Well, because it sounds to me like you were going with your gut instinct in my family. It's accepted that sometimes your gut knows more about what's going on than you had. Just because you can't justify it, doesn't mean you can dismiss it. Who knows, there may be something there about her." With that, Kiba simply placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. "Don't worry, man, we'll figure things out." After thanking Kiba, Naruto and the 2 genin went back to their nightly watch. After breaking camp and making their way on foot, the team arrived at Jizen early the following morning. Jizen was not a town that stood out. The village had a harbor and marina in the small, enclosed bay, just like the majority of coastal towns in the region. Numerous small ships were coming and going, transporting everything from exotic imports to fish and shellfish. For a mere 20 feet or so, 2 cliffs rose and loomed over the bay. To keep ships away from the cliffsides in the fog, a lighthouse was spotted atop one of the cliffs. The tiny cottage on the other side was oriented to face the ocean. There were a few small eateries and stores selling everything from food and clothes to weapons. A post office, a bank, a small non-shinobi library, and a few homes for the locals were also present to keep most enemies out. Some low walls were built, but any skilled ninja could have scaled them with little difficulty at the moment. Only a handful of people were moving around and starting their days after meeting the guards outside the town. The team was led inside to meet with the mayor, to whom they were to deliver the Hokage's documents. The secretary instructed Kurenai, Shino, Hinata, Kiba, and Naruto to wait outside the mayor's office while she informed him of their presence when they arrived at the town hall. The secretary let the Konaha ninja into the office. After 10 or so minutes they were welcomed by an otherwise unremarkable office, which is typical of a small-time politician. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, a small goatee, and a mustache sat behind the desk in the room. The mayor was dressed in zori and casual attire, indicating that he was likely unaccustomed to more formal gatherings. He introduced himself and made a formal bow, as was customary. "Hello, my name is Daisuke, and I am the mayor of Jizen. I assume you are here representing Konaha, if your headbands are anything to go by." Kurenai concluded, bowed to Daisuke, and turned to her team, signaling that she wanted each of them to introduce themselves. "Yes, we are. My name is Kurenai Yuhi. Jonin Kunoichi of Konohagakure no Sato. I am here with my genin team to deliver potential documents for you to look over in terms of an alliance with Konaha. Nothing more, nothing less. I am Shino Aburame. It is an honor to meet your acquaintance, Daisuke-san," Shino said, bowing formally. Saying, name's Kiba Inuzuka, and this is my partner Akamaru. The dog yaps in acknowledgement. The leader was given another formal bow. I'm Hinata Hyuga. It's a pleasure to meet you, Daisuke-san. Daisuke stopped when the mayor said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of Konaha. Datbeo. In contrast to the other names, which he simply nodded and smiled at. Naruto and company felt a little uneasy as he looked at the blonde genin in shock. What did you say your name was? Naruto glanced at his teammates before turning to face his sensei, who merely shrugged her shoulders and suggested that Naruto should comply. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, sir. Daisuke asked the container of blonde demons, do you know anything about your parents, Naruto-san? In response, Naruto said, not really. All I know is that my dad died in the Kyuubi attack. I don't even know anything about my mother. While being honest, Hiruzen only ever mentioned to Naruto that his father lost his life while attempting to battle the fox. It's arguable whether the Hokage never told his mother what had happened because he didn't know who she was or because he wanted to keep her identity a secret. How old are you? I will be 13 tomorrow, Daisuke-san. Crossing her arms, Kurenai said, what is with the questions, if I may be so bold, Daisuke-san? He was playing 20 questions with Naruto, which made her a little nervous at the moment. There seemed to be a bit more to this than mere interest, call it overprotectiveness. But Kurenai was not one to play around with easy tricks when it came to her students. Daisuke realized his mistake and fixed it. My sincerest apologies, Kurenai-san. I did not mean to sound so suspicious. It is just that we have a woman in her late 30s that lives here with the same surname as your student. The rest of the room fell silent at this to see if this was a trick. The rest of Naruto's team was just glancing back and forth between Daisuke and Naruto. Naruto, meanwhile, was in complete shock. Did someone else with the last name Uzumaki reside here? He was searching for precisely this. He wouldn't get too excited about the possibility that this was his mother, but it could still be a relative. If he was fortunate, they might even have a hint as to his mother's location. But as soon as that thought occurred to him, another one did as well, causing him to shift from excitement to fear. Daisuke noticed this and inquired as to what was wrong. Kurenai asked if she and her team could speak with Naruto alone for a moment before continuing, and before Naruto could respond, Daisuke excused himself and left the room. Kurenai said, so, Naruto, is something wrong? His sensei noticed Naruto's nervous expression and wanted to confirm that her student was completely fine. Naruto thought about it for a few seconds before responding. Well, I just thought about something. I am ecstatic that this person could be my relative. Or even if I am lucky, my mom. I would want nothing more than to find out if this is a relative of mine. His teammates nodded. They were all aware of Naruto's desire to learn more about his family, and he was thrilled about the possibility that his mother was still alive. Well, I just thought about what might happen if we meet, and this person does turn out to be my mom. The question that everyone was asking was posed by Kiba. What do you mean, Naruto? Well, I just wondered what might happen if we do meet. I know nothing about this woman, or about what she thinks of me. I can probably assume she knows about the fox, since she was there when the fourth took me for the ceiling. I guess my fear is in wondering if she ran away thinking I was a monster. What if she thought I was responsible for my dad's death? What if she hates me like all the other villagers? What if she doesn't even want to see me? Replied Naruto. Naturally, nobody knew how to respond to that. In actuality, Naruto had some legitimate worries. Nobody was aware of this woman's background or the reasons behind her leaving Naruto. As a matter of fact, they had no idea who this individual was other than an Uzumaki. Kurenai just approached Naruto and dropped to her knees, bringing herself to his eye level. Naruto turned to his team, who merely gave him a comforting glance. I understand your concerns, Naruto. That said, we will all be there for support. I am sure all of us are curious about all of this. Don't worry. We will find out together, he said. Thank you, in a whisper before Daisuke came back. Then Kurenai looked at Daisuke. Daisuke-san, I know our mission was to deliver those documents, but is there any way we might be able to meet this woman and perhaps learn more about her? He led Team 8 to the mystery woman's home after saying, of course you can. I was going to ask if you would all like to come meet her. Business is slow today, so we could all walk over to her cottage and have a talk. I can explain her situation on the way. Daisuke started telling Team 8 about the woman as the sextet headed to the cottage, which was presumably the one on the opposite cliff from the lighthouse that had a view of the sea. She arrived here by an escort a little over a decade ago with only a few personal belongings to call her own. When we asked her where she came from, she told us that she was coming from Konaha, which was attacked by the Kyuubi no Yoko. She told us her son and husband was killed in the attack and that she simply was trying to get away from the pain and destruction caused by the demon. Apparently, the man who escorted her was the one that showed her the corpses of her late husband and son. She couldn't accept that her husband and son were dead, so she was taken by escort here. where we were rebuilding at the time since our village was mostly destroyed during the last Great War. She has been here since that day. Now, all she is doing is following the same routine. She gets up in the morning, performs some warm-ups, eats breakfast, trains some more, has lunch, walks around town, and spends the afternoon either gazing out at the ocean or going through a photo album she has before having dinner and going to sleep. She pretty much has followed that routine for over a decade. I have tried to convince her to do something else, but she simply seems to be going through the motions, almost as if her life no longer has any meaning for her. That's a real pity. Too, she is a rather beautiful woman, even after all these years. At least in my opinion still. Maybe U5 might just be what the doctor ordered. In front of the cottage, they stopped. It was a typical 3-bedroom home with a front door. Nothing special. You could enjoy the sunset view from the master bedroom or from the back porch in general. The house was not particularly noteworthy. After getting 5 nods from his guests, Daisuke entered the cottage and discovered the woman. Perhaps it would be best if you wait out here while I announce you. I am one of the few people she talks with on a regular basis. The cottage's owner was lying under an umbrella in an Adirondack chair on her back porch, with a table and a cup of tea beside her. Wearing gray sweatpants and a blue t-shirt, she looked to be in her late 30s. She didn't care about their attire at the moment, but other women might have. Her long, crimson hair merely hung like a curtain from her shoulders. She was currently looking at a photo album of her own memories with violet eyes. At the moment, the album was turned to a picture that she regarded as her most valuable possession. The only thing that was left of her child was a photo of her holding her newborn son in the hospital the day he was taken from her and sent to die. Was something she would always remember. To be honest, she lost a piece of herself that day when she saw his body that day. She lost the side of herself that liked to joke around and talk to her friends when she had to identify her family's remains. Her favorite saying, "to never give up," had little meaning. A knock on her door snapped her out of her reverie. She had a gut feeling that Daisuke was paying her another visit. Every time he visited, he would try to persuade her to do anything in order to leave her cottage. To be honest, her only desire at this point was to live out the remainder of her abandoned life in solitude, but she would not refuse company, if only to keep herself from going crazy from spending too much time alone with her thoughts. After setting her record on the table beside her, she stood up to answer the door. Good, she started, then looked at her porch sundial to see what time it was. 12:37 p.m. Afternoon. Daisuke-san, what can I do for you today? She asked. Actually, I came to inform you that you have some guests. Kushina-san, apparently, they're from Konaha and... She turned to the photo album and then sat back down to look at the picture while trying to keep a tear from falling on the page. You know how I feel about that place. Daisuke-san, that place simply brings up too many memories for me. Some very painful memories. You know, he would have been 13 tomorrow. I'm aware of your disdain of Konaha, Kushina-san, but one of them is claiming to be an Uzumaki. I figured you might want to see them and see for yourself if you know them. The woman, now known as Kushina, was in disbelief. She was certain that the remaining members of her family perished when Uzu no Kuni was exterminated during one of the country's final upheavals. The final Uzumaki was her. No one else had that name, so before traveling to Konaha, she made sure to locate the rest of her family in every country. So why would someone give someone that name in order to torment her? She just needed to know. Alright, I will see them. Who knows, maybe they can tell me who decided to play this sick joke on an emotionally distressed woman, replied Kushina after expressing pain over Kushina's tone and language. Daisuke turned around and went back through the house to let Team 8 in. After his brief speech, Daisuke went to sit on the living room couch while Kurenai, Naruto, Kiba, Hinata, and finally Shino walked out to the back porch. Alright, she is willing to see you all, but be careful. Konaha brings a lot of painful memories for her, so you might want to be careful. If you need me, I will be in the living room. As they left, Naruto was in the lead, followed by Kurenai, and behind her were Shino, Hinata, and Kiba, who had Akamaru on his head. They believed that since this was a meeting between Naruto and a possible relative, they would support him while also giving him some space. Kurenai stepped back to observe Naruto's interactions with this woman and gave him a pat on the back. Naruto started by taking a deep breath to try to calm himself. Uncertain of where to begin, Naruto said, Excuse me, Uzumaki-san? If she hated him, it wouldn't help to ask her who she was in situations like these. Naruto berated himself for lacking greater social skills. He hoped that if he had trouble communicating with this woman, whoever she was, she wouldn't take it personally. It would be safe to say that he would rather be facing this woman than one of Kurenai's sensei's genjutsu at the moment. In an attempt to start off by declaring that she was not in the mood to play games, Kushina turned back to her speaker. But when she turned around and saw Naruto directly, whatever remark she had died in her throat. Her entire attention was on the young man in front of her, and she paid no attention to the other 4 people on her porch. He had on a blue coat, brown shinobi pants, a burnt orange t-shirt, and black ninja sandals. He looked to be around 12 or 13 years old and stood at about 4 feet 8 inches. His young head was a wild mess of blonde hair, but she was more interested in his face. He resembled her dead son exactly, with 3 whisker-like birthmarks on his cheeks and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look into your soul. No, it's not possible. I saw his corpse. Oh, Kami, please don't let this be a ruse. Kushina pondered. Kai, she exclaimed, putting her hands into a ram seal in an effort to overcome any genjutsu. She was shocked when she proved that what she was seeing was real. Naruto said, miss. In confusion, he didn't know the reason behind this woman's behavior. He anticipated a hostile expression, shouting, and even the use of the terms, demon, or monster. But testing for genjutsu? Did she somehow believe he wasn't real? She chose to speak again before he could ask, and what she said was not what he had anticipated, rather, it was only what he had hoped for. Sochi, Kushina was unconvinced. She was confronted by her living son, whom she had assumed had died the night of the fox's attack. She had no idea how or why he was there. She didn't care that she had been misled at the time. The fact that she had to leave her son behind didn't bother her. She was only concerned with the fact that she was in front of her son at that precise moment. This was all too much for the former kunoichi to handle, and she was unable to suppress her feelings any longer. With a photo album in her hand, she started to cry as she approached her son. Naruto was anxious now. If he wasn't already normally, he could hardly deal with women, but now this woman was calling him son, crying, and approaching him while holding an album. He was worried. He was extremely anxious. Did she cry because, like everyone else, she detested him? Was she upset that she was crying? But before his anxieties could overcome him, she paused in front of him and showed him one picture. He was compelled to start crying after just one glance at the disputed picture. The woman in the picture was the same one who was standing in front of him. In addition to holding a blonde baby, she had a smile that spread from ear to ear in a way that was similar to his own foxy grin. But what was special about the baby was that it had his exact same whisker marks on its cheeks. Tsunade of the Sanin's realization that this woman was his mother came to him like a blow. His eyes were beseeching as he gazed up at the woman in question. She nodded and said, "KKK Ka-san." Naruto instantly jumped into his mother's arms, allowing nearly 13 years of loneliness, despair, and frustration to finally flow out like a river to a dry land. As the now overflowing salt water builds up on her cheeks, Kushina herself was also unable to control her emotions. "My Sochi, my beautiful baby boy," she repeated over and over again as she continued to embrace her son. At last, her heart felt at peace. A piece of her life was restored. Her family was back with her when they were reunited in a way that even this author cannot explain. They both let out deep sobs and simply allowed the pain in their hearts to finally go away. Team 8 stood aside and gave the mother and son their time together as they reunited. Kurenai was trying, but failing miserably, to control her own emotions. She thought the scene was taken directly from some of the best family books she had ever read. She concluded that anyone who was staring at the scene in front of her and didn't feel anything had a severe mental illness. She had a gut feeling that her charge was being watched over by someone upstairs. They were given this mission for a reason, and she now suspected she knew what it was. Shino was moved to tears as well, but at least he was currently better at hiding it than anyone else. In contrast, Kiba was a complete mess. Kiba's tattoos had tear stains that made them appear as though someone had glossed them up. Kiba noticed his teammate's raised eyebrow, which was more a result of curiosity than anything else. Shino tried hard to clear his vision, but the Inuzuka only gave him the explanation, "Stupid salt water got something in my eye." To be honest, this was one of the few occasions when Kiba truly didn't care that he looked like a girl crying uncontrollably. Naruto had been anticipating this moment for a very long time, and he was just too happy to act macho as he usually did. He would be pleased to acknowledge that he shed tears today. Conversely, Hinata was happy for Naruto. She was happy that Naruto's birthday present was exactly what he had requested. It had not been a great secret that Naruto's only desires were to learn more about his family and to feel valued. Hinata felt as cozy as a cabin with a fire in the hearth after learning that his mother was still alive. Cheers to Naruto-kun's birthday. That means you got what you wanted. I guess who knows, perhaps I will too someday. Team 8 and the recently reunited Uzumaki family were led back into the cottage by Kurenai and Daisuke. The reunion of mother and son had touched the hearts of everyone in attendance. Kushina offered water to everyone who was thirsty as soon as things had calmed down a bit. Kurenai and Daisuke refused, stating that they would like to try to review the documents that were sent by the Sandaime Hokage. In order to give Naruto some alone time with his mother, Kiba, Shino, and Hinata offered to accompany her. Since he was a little anxious about spending any time by himself with her, Naruto initially wanted to ask that they stay. However, Kushina reassured him by asking that the rest of his team be permitted to remain in her cottage until they were prepared to depart in agreement. Kurenai trailed Daisuke back to his office. Kiba, Shino, and Hinata told Naruto that they would explore the town and return by that evening because they were unsure of what to do. After being left by himself with his mother, Naruto became a little more anxious. When it came to this situation, Naruto wasn't sure where to start. He had been dreaming about this moment for a long time, and he wasn't sure where to begin now that it had arrived. Even though he had a lot of questions, he was nervous about their responses. He simply had a lot of questions. How did she behave? Did he share any characteristics with her? Did she spend the entire time in this coastal town? Was she aware of his other relatives? The most crucial question of all is probably whether she loved him and, if so, why she left him. Kushina noticed the expression in her son's eyes as she sat down. His blue eyes were growing confused, and she could see it. She had as many questions racing through her head and heart as he did, so she couldn't really blame him for that. How did he behave? Did he inherit any traits from her or her husband? During her exile, had anyone bothered to look after him? Not to mention the scariest thing she was thinking about. Did he despise her because of what she had done? Following a rather awkward silence, Naruto made the decision to speak first. So, where do you want to start, Ka-san? Kushina raised her eyes to her son. To be honest, she tried to focus her questions because she had a lot of them. Why don't we start at the beginning? How about if you tell me what your life has been like, and I will tell you mine, although I must admit that mine probably won't be nearly as exciting as yours, considering who has been taking care of you and all. Naruto looked at her bewilderedly. I don't mean to be rude or anything, Ka-san, but what are you talking about? I was forced to raise myself up until recently. I didn't really have anybody. Was there supposed to be someone looking after me? To Kushina's surprise, did he have to grow up by himself? What about one of his father's students, or his godfather? One of them should have been watching out for him, right? Kushina made the decision to investigate. Naruto, are you aware of who your father was? Or that you had a godfather? Or that your father had a genin team? Naruto gave a headshake. No, the old man never told me any of that. He only said that he died during the Kyuubi attack and that I would be able to find out more about him when I turned 16 or become a chunin. He never said that my dad had a genin team or that I had a godfather. Kushina was furious inside. The people who were meant to be caring for her son were failing to do so, forcing him to grow up alone. She and Minato even informed Jiraiya and Kakashi that one of them was meant to watch out for Naruto in the event that something happened to her and Minato. She might somewhat understand Kakashi if he experienced a similar depressive episode to hers, as he had when his teammate Obito Uchiha passed away, but Jiraiya? No way was he going to get away with this one. Kushina thought murderously, oh, there will be hell to pay when I get my hands on that super perverted, toad whispering, lazy good-for-nothing sack of crap. In the meantime, a man who looked to be in his 50s was snooping on some women taking a bath in a nearby hot spring somewhere in High no Kuni. He had a personalized Hite 8 with the kanji for oil written on it, representing the toads of Myobokuzen. His skin was marked with twin red lines of war paint that extended down his cheeks from his eyes. His head was adorned with a mane of wild white hair that was pulled back into a ponytail, wearing a green vest, green pants, wooden getas, a red vest with a yellow oval on each side of the chest, and a mesh undershirt. His outfit was the most out of the ordinary for a shinobi. He had a massive scroll strapped to his back. He was Jiraiya the Toad Sage, also known as the Village Madness, the Perverted Hermit, or the creator of the notorious Icha Icha series of adult literature. A shiver went up the man's back as though fate had given him a humorous cue. He checked his surroundings to see if anyone had noticed him, but he couldn't find anyone. It was so cold that it felt like someone had peed on his grave, then dressed up in drag and danced on it while playing some annoying kid's song. Jiraiya thought, dude, and Tsunade almost kicked the living hell out of me for researching them the last time I felt something like that. Dude, why'd I always experience these kinds of emotions? Naruto was becoming a little anxious. His mother appeared to be wearing a murderous expression. Naruto made the decision to speak up in the hopes of sparing whoever she was considering killing. Mom, about these guys you were talking about. Kushina blinked, totally losing track of the fact that she was speaking. Sorry about that, Sochi. I was just thinking about what I am going to have to do with a few people that were supposed to be taking care of you if something were to happen to me or your father. So, is there any way you might be able to tell me more about my dad? Perhaps, but I won't tell you just yet until we get back to Konaha. I would rather not blab about something that is more than likely an S-class secret and risk losing my head, if you catch my drift. With excitement, Naruto said, wait, so you will be coming back with us? Knowing his mother was still alive was one thing, but he was ecstatic to learn that she desired to come back. Smiling, Kushina said with a fleeting smile. Naruto sank into a sullen frown. Well, I have been away from the village for too long, and there are some people that I need answers from besides. What kind of mother finds her son after 13 years and doesn't try to get to know him better? He said. So, why did you leave me, Ka-san? Did something happen? Naruto inquired. He was aware that he was being direct, but he was at a loss for how else to phrase the question. To be honest, he was probably the most interested and nervous about this specific query. Although he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer, he was aware that he needed it if he was ever to understand why he had to grow up despised and alone. Naruto was taken aback when Kushina started crying in response to his question. She avoided looking him in the eye and turned away. She then gave him her response in a whisper, revealing something unexpected to Naruto. Because I thought you were dead? Naruto was taken aback. Excuse me? Kushina started her story of grief, which was the origin of the truth of her circumstances, with the words, perhaps it might be easier to explain things if I told you the whole story. Flashback. 13 years. Location. Room 205, Konaha Hospital. Naturally, Kushina had every right to feel worn out. She reserved the right to not be in optimal condition after 8 hours of labor. She had given birth to her first child with Minato, a young boy they named Naruto after a character in one of his pervert sensei's books. In ways that even made some of the Anbu who protected her husband wince, she could still recall chewing out Minato and declaring that she did not want to experience this kind of pain ever again. She also screamed obscenities and threatened to sterilize Minato. Fortunately, the sounds of her child's first cry of life made everything seem worthwhile after a full workday of agony and suffering. She wanted to be happy and spend time with her child, but it seems that fate was acting out because the Kyuubi no Yoko was on the rampage just outside the village. Minato was already trying to come up with a plan to stop the Biju as soon as he learned about the attack the day before. Since the village was so big and it would take too long to evacuate both the residents and the shinobi, evacuation was not an option. Because the Great Demon Fox was a monstrosity made mostly of super condensed chakra, no amount of force other than another Biju could eliminate it, so killing it was impossible. The only thing left to do was to encase the beast inside a baby's body like the Ichibi no Shukaku of Suna or the Hachibi no Kyogyu of Kumo. He could have tried to seal the fox into an inanimate object, but the Ichibi was by far the weakest of the tailed beasts, and the Hachibi had a habit of needing to be sealed inside another person because the container would never hold for any length of time. Kushina anticipated Minato's request to use their son in the procedure. Making Jinchuriki from members of Akage's own family was regarded as standard procedure, and she was aware that Minato lacked the compassion to make any other orphan or family shoulder a burden that his own family would not. Although Kushina's reasoning at the time was illogical, she came to the conclusion that Minato's willingness to put the village's needs ahead of his own happiness, despite his achievements and notoriety, was a flaw in him. That was one of the reasons he had not married her yet. He had wished to wait until after the birth of his son to avoid using his pregnant wife as a negotiating chip with the villagers. Naturally, Kushina thought the entire situation was ridiculous. While it was true that using a different child for the sealing could be seen as callous and that not wanting to get married was one thing, would it really be any easier for him to use Naruto and conceal his ancestry? Minato's plan had succeeded, as evidenced by the flash of light outside. He was successful in his plan to seal the Kyuubi into her son, as she had predicted, because the fox was nowhere to be seen. Waiting for someone like Kakashi or Jiraiya to enter with her son was now the only thing left to do. After a few minutes, not even the sound of people outside could be heard. After 30 minutes, Kushina started to feel a little more anxious. Why wasn't anyone coming inside to explain the situation to her? Why wasn't anyone there to break the bad news to her? Above all, where was her son? A man in a white lab coat entered with a bundle. Seemingly in response to her silent inquiries, Kushina identified the man as belonging to the R&D division, which Orochimaru was in charge of. The new mother felt uneasy because of the dejected expression in his amber eyes. Sir, what's going on? Where's my baby? The man in the coat glanced at Kushina and then at the bundle. I'm sorry, Kushina-san, but I have been sent by the Sandame to inform you that your husband has passed on due to the complications of the sealing process. You didn't answer my question. I was already aware that Minato-kun would die. I am asking about my son. Where is he? Kushina broke down in tears. Your son did not survive the sealing process. His body could not handle the strain of the immense amount of demonic chakra that the fox contained, so the beast died with the child. I am sorry for your loss. The man concluded with an apology. He then presented Kushina with her son's body. He had blonde hair, a seal on his stomach, and 6 whisker marks on his cheeks. His body smelled of death and was cold to the touch. Kushina's world and her heart broke after she held the body of her newborn son. It was one thing to lose her husband. She was already aware that she would become a widow, but it was too much to lose her son. She had already lost the love of her life, her family, and her homeland now. She had to deal with the loss of her child. She broke down because it was the only thing that came naturally to her. A mother's sobs were the only sound to be heard for several minutes. Final flashback. By the time Kushina was done, she was struggling to maintain her poise. Had it not been for the fact that her eyes were starting to dry out, she would have cried more. She then turned to look pleadingly at Naruto, the son she believed to be dead. After I saw your body, I just couldn't take it. I couldn't stay there. The man that gave me your body offered me some assistance to pack my things so that I could be moved out of the hospital, and even found some Anbu willing to help me get away from the village. I didn't think that there was anything left for me in Konaha. Then Kushina turned to her son, Naruto. I beg of you, please forgive me. I didn't mean to leave you alone like that for so long. I felt so numb after realizing that I would not be able to care for you. I know I should have checked to see if that baby was even you, but I was so distraught that I didn't think. I know that I don't deserve forgiveness for abandoning you, but... Naruto interrupted Kushina by embracing his mother as he walked around the table they were seated at. You thought I was dead. You were given a dead body. I thought you might have been dead or simply abandoned me. The important thing now is that you and I are together again and that you love me, right? He inquired with concern. After giving a nod, Kushina gave the hug back. The mother and son just sat there and embraced, reassured that this was just the beginning, of course, and I will always love you, no matter what happens. Back in Konaha, Hiruzen was perusing a photo album that contained a number of his favorite memories as Hokage. While traveling down memory lane, he paused at a specific picture. It was an image of his successor Minato Namikaze with his lover Kushina Uzumaki, who was 8 months pregnant. In the background, Jiraiya was smiling like he had won the lottery. As they stood next to Hiruzen, the aging shinobi was filled with sadness. Despite the picture's generally cheerful tone, it served as a painful reminder of the true reason Hiruzen kept his mother a secret from Naruto. Flashback. 13 years. Location: morgue in Konaha. Hiruzen was feeling dejected. The mother of his infant son was missing after his predecessor, Minato Namikaze, gave his life to defeat the Kyuubi no Yoko. 3 hours ago, she vanished, and no one has seen her since. A man who appeared to be from the R&D department approached Hiruzen and instructed him to follow him down to the morgue. While he was thinking about bringing in a group of shinobi to try and locate her, he ran into the same person, who started by breaking the terrible news to the elderly Kage. Hokage-sama, I have some terrible news. The body of Kushina Uzumaki has been found. Hiruzen was unable to fully understand how this had occurred. You found her body? But how is that possible? The doctors said she was healthy as an ox. Kushina appeared to be doing well when Minato departed, and her birth was uneventful. Apparently, sir, Kushina-san received a fatal cerebral hemorrhage from a blow to the head she sustained when the hospital was hit during the attack. We have labeled her death as a casualty of the Kyuubi's attack. I am sorry, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen placed his head in his hands and sat down in a chair. It was becoming the worst period of his life. Only a few years after resigning, he was compelled to assume the role of Hokage once more, and now he had to deal with an orphan Jinchuriki who was being sought dead by some shinobi and some villagers. Final flashback. In an effort to lighten the load on his sagging heart, Hiruzen took a drag from his pipe. He lacked the courage to inform Naruto of the deaths of both of his parents. Ultimately, how simple is it to convey to a child that they are genuinely alone in the world? Hopefully, Naruto would be able to comprehend that Hiruzen just didn't want to see him suffer when he was old enough to understand the truth. It had been several hours since Kushina and Naruto had their private conversation. When Kurenai and the other members of Team 8 learned that Kushina wanted to take everyone back to Konaha, they offered to assist her with packing. Kushina offered to prepare dinner for everyone that evening. After that was decided, since Kushina lived alone and didn't have much to start with, the spread was rather easy. Everyone enjoyed the meal, which consisted of grilled fish and a basic pot of salt ramen. This was the first time anyone other than the Ichirakus had ever prepared a meal for Naruto, and he nearly burst into tears. Everyone laughed a lot and shared stories with one another. While in Konaha, Kushina led a group of genin, and she related some of the stories she told. To everyone's surprise, her team included Hayate Gecko, a kenjutsu master in Konaha, Yuga Uzuki, a dominant member of the Konaha Anbu, and, in a surprising turn of events, Iruka Amino. Naruto would have to keep that small fact in mind for his next encounter with Iruka-sensei. She also informed her audience that she had contributed significantly to the war effort during the Third Great Shinobi World War and had actually assisted Konaha a lot prior to becoming pregnant with Naruto. Her ability to kill an entire platoon of enemy combatants by herself earned her the nickname, the Crimson Reaper, when she appeared on the battlefield wearing her uniform and crimson hair. The Seven Swordsmen of the Mist acknowledged her as a worthy opponent because of her apparent skill with a bow staff. In fact, the village began donning a red spiral, a former emblem of Uzu no Kuni, on all of their uniforms as part of her duty to Konaha. The genin was amazed by that little fact. No one had ever been able to determine the reason behind the red insignia on their uniforms, although there had always been rumors about it. To put it mildly, it was impressive to learn that the woman in front of them was the reason. Meanwhile, Kushina listened to a number of the stories Team 8 had to share about their training and missions. Thus far, some of the antics her son had engaged in made her laugh uncontrollably. The Hyuga girl had a crush on her Sochi, unless she missed her guess, and Shino seemed to be the voice of reason in their intense rivalry, which was almost like that between siblings. She would need to investigate that further. Unfortunately, Kiba erred when he brought up how Team 8 had devolved into a 5-man squad. From the test to the hospital visit, he recounted the entire story from beginning to end. It goes without saying that Kushina was furious. She was furious at the thought of someone almost killing her son. She had planned to go and make history by killing the fabled copycat ninja and the pink witch who chose to use her son as a training dummy, but Naruto was able to talk her out of it. Even though she hated to admit it, she couldn't bring herself to hurt someone Naruto had already shown forgiveness to. However, that did not imply that she was unwilling to meet them. Oh, how she enjoyed the thought of putting fear in their hearts. One might have surmised that Kushina might have had some Mitarashi ancestry if no one else knew. Before long, everyone was exhausted and retired for the night. Kiba and Shino offered to sleep in the living room, while Kurenai and Hinata retired to one of the bedrooms. Naruto was left with the final bed. Neither of his teammates wanted to hear about it, so he tried to say that they could share. They decided that sharing a bed was not something they wanted to do. Once that was resolved, everyone put on their pajamas and went to sleep. Naruto had slipped into a nightmare in the middle of the night. Even though he didn't have them frequently or with his team, they were still excruciating. Horror. In the midst of a faceless crowd was Naruto. He could hear the taunts and derogatory remarks being hurled at him from all sides every time. It was the same nightmare. No one would ever look at him. No one would speak to him directly. He appeared to be ill, and the thought of seeing him would make you feel ill as well. He was still the target of the insults. Atrocious abomination. Demented demon. What a pathetic excuse for a waste of space. Naruto was deeply hurt by each insult. He wanted to cry, but he was aware that doing so would only make the people feel good about hurting him. In addition, he now had people who were interested in him, or so he believed. Iruka, Kurenai, Kiba, Shino, Hinata, Tachui, Ayame, the third, Shikamaru, and Choji were among the group of people he was regarded as close to. As he persisted in pleading for someone to listen to him, he made an unsuccessful attempt to get them to listen to him and look at him. Everyone there just began to leave. Disregarding the pleas for attention, Naruto suffered more pain from each person's hurtful words than from any other wound. Iruka. What a letdown that I nearly lost my life defending such a worthless shinobi. Tachui. Ayame, come on, that monster has squandered enough of our charity. It's clear that people like him will never return the money we owe them. Ayame. Obviously, father. Ultimately, how can we have faith in a fox like him? Hiruzen. You, Hokage, don't be so dumb. You are not good enough to be considered anything other than the demon you are, much less the Hokage. Kurenai. I clearly made a mistake by accepting you as a student. You will never be worth my time and will always be a dead last. Kiba. You don't understand. Dogs and foxes are incompatible. Shino. Being friends with a monster such as yourself would be illogical. Our clan is useful. At least you can't even say that. Hinata. You really believe that I would want to be your friend? I don't need to listen to your constant whining. I have enough issues of my own. Shikamaru. Talking to someone who is causing so much trouble is too much to handle. Come on, Choji. Choji. Man, even giving you my empty bag of chips would be beneath me. Everybody turned away, leaving Naruto alone once more. He felt the wall of people closing in on him, attempting to keep him from escaping to the freedoms of the outside world. But the more he struggled, the more he was drawn in. Then, all of a sudden, Naruto saw his mother, the one person he knew would not turn him away. Mom, please. Mom, see me, please help me. Naruto screamed and pleaded. Why would I help you? She asked, turning to face him icily. The fact that I no longer have a husband is your fault. I had to endure this suffering for so long because of you. Had it not been for you, I might still have a family. I despise you. Naruto kept sobbing as his mother left, abandoning him to the growing number of anonymous tormentors. Put an end to the nightmare when Kushina heard whimpering coming from the other room. She didn't know what it was until she realized it was her son's voice. She threw off her covers and slipped into Naruto's sleeping quarters, where she saw him tossing and turning. She wasn't sure what the nightmare was about or how bad it was, but she had a gut feeling when Naruto began pleading in his sleep. I apologize, Kosan, please return. Please don't be mean to me. Don't leave me, please. He must have feared being abandoned, or at least alone, and Kushina was devastated, Thinking that he was going to leave him, hearing her son plead for her to stay was heartbreaking, and when she could take it no more, she went to his bed and shook him until he woke up. Naruto looked around as soon as he woke up, saw his mother, and jumped into her arms while repeatedly apologizing. Naruto went on, "I'm sorry that dad is gone. I'm sorry you don't have a family anymore. I'm sorry," until Kushina began shushing him and rubbing his back in a calming manner. "Now, Sochi, keep quiet, you are not hated by me, all you were experiencing was a bad dream. Now everything will be alright, come. Follow me." Kushina then led Naruto into her bedroom, where he was initially perplexed until she climbed under the covers and asked him to do the same. He got into her bed, but he didn't understand why he was there, so she pulled him to her and held him close while humming to try to calm him down. She could tell that his eyes were drooping, indicating that he would soon fall back asleep, so she chose to wish him a good night. "Now, my little maelstrom, you're going to stay here tonight. Go to bed now. I swear that I won't abandon you. Being abandoned is no longer a concern for you. I will always and forever be here for you, Sochi. I adore you." Naruto whispered in a broken voice, "I love you too, Ka-san," and then he took a deep breath, enjoying the scent of fresh linens and oceans that he could only describe as his mother's scent. Naruto fell asleep for the first time in a long time, and he didn't mind the arrangement. For once, it made him feel at peace, like a regular kid staying with his mother before he drifted off to greener dream pastures. He had one final thought. "This is the most amazing birthday gift I've ever received." The journey back to Konaha from Jizen Guide took 3 days. Luckily, Kushina had kept up with her training, so Team 8 did not have to slow down for her. The return trip to the village went smoothly. It mostly consisted of Kiba and Naruto exchanging stories and the occasional altercation. When they had a break, Kiba and Naruto would try to spar, which usually ended with the two of them fighting before either Shino and Hinata or Torune and Kushina broke the two up. The two young men were getting impatient about not being able to train because Torune wanted to return to the village with Kushina as soon as possible. Observing the young Iruka and the blonde was similar to witnessing two young siblings quarreling over a toy, but instead of using fisticuffs, they used claws and taijutsu. On their 3rd day of travel, Torune arrived at the gates of Konaha after sunrise and went to the gate guards to announce a successful mission and to inform them that they had one person in tow who needed to see the Hokage. After completing routine checks for disguises and identity confirmations, the guards granted them entry. Kushina had no trouble entering the village because she still had a valid ID for Konaha, which she had preserved as a memento and a reminder of what she had lost. Kushina started to see the sights of her former home, or at least the place she had called home after leaving Uzunokuni, as soon as the sextet started to walk to the Hokage's tower. With the exception of the younger generations now residing there, the village appeared to have remained mostly unaltered. The hateful glares and whispers directed at her son in particular, as well as the group's path, were not missed by Kushina. Kushina turned to face Naruto, who was clearly attempting to ignore the situation. His team made an effort to appear unaffected as well, but they were obviously watching. Kushina scowled. The unfortunate people who gazed upon Naruto as the Kyuubi would likely be pleading for forgiveness and practically worshipping the ground he walked on. If they were aware of his ancestry, Naruto probably wouldn't want that. He would prefer to earn respect rather than have it bestowed upon him. Nevertheless, she hoped that her child's situation was at least marginally better. On the other hand, she knew that at least one person would treat her son fairly and that at least a few others cared about Naruto. She saw the red-faced heiress staring at her son. Torune acknowledged that the young Hyuga did have a crush on Naruto, but she was too timid and self-conscious about her ninja skills to take any action. Kushina had discussed the matter privately with Torune. Torune explained to Kushina that Hinata's goal was to improve her clan and gain the strength to walk on an equal footing with Naruto. This girl's desire to demonstrate her strength was admirable to Kushina, who thought it was a great goal for a girl of her age. If it worked out, Kushina could start playing matchmaker, but she would need to work with Torune to boost the girl's confidence. God knows Naruto could use someone who genuinely cared about him but didn't want to use him to achieve their own objectives. A male villager, probably in his late 40s, had tried to approach her, interrupting her thoughts. Everyone was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, including Kushina and Naruto. Naturally, the man clearly didn't give it any thought. Naruto was only angry that someone had the audacity to approach his mother when it was obvious that she had no interest in him. Before he said something that stopped them cold, the group attempted to ignore the possible suitor. "You know, lady, I could treat you to a nice dinner. I could also protect you. You wouldn't want to risk your life hanging around with the resident demon of Konaha." That was all he managed to do, because as soon as he finished speaking, Kushina appeared behind him, pinning him to the wall with her forearm from his diaphragm and a kunai to his throat, which was already red. It was enough to almost empty his bowels, but he wasn't bleeding yet. Her normally lovely face appeared to be painted with a calculating and frigid expression. The already horrifying situation was only made worse by some well-intentioned murderous intent to ensure that only he would hear her words. Kushina leaned into his ear. Listen well, because I am only saying this once. My son is not a demon, he never has been, and he never will be. I do not appreciate you insinuating that he would harm anyone in this village, even though he has every right to. If I ever hear of you or anyone else implying that he is anything else, well, let's just say that not even Tsunade Senju would be able to put what's left of you back to a presentable condition. Am I clear? Her demand was met with a dumb nod from the man. He promptly complied with orders because he was not nearly as stupid as to believe that he could get away with the same thing twice. He ran as quickly as he could in the opposite direction when she finally released him. When Kushina turned around, he saw that everyone was staring at them in amazement. What? The first to recover was Kiba. Kurenai gave him a slap on the head for saying, "That was the hottest thing I have ever seen." Shino and Hinata had to stop Naruto from beating the living daylights out of Kiba, to Kushina's and the others' covert amusement. Naruto threatened to neuter Kiba during the remainder of the journey to the tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat beneath a pile of documents. His secretary informed him that Team 8 was returning from their mission while he was completing additional mission reports and other pointless paperwork. Hiruzen let the team in, but there was only one person following them. Hiruzen did not anticipate seeing that individual. He was looking directly at what he believed to be Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto tried to attract the old man's attention with his typical flamboyant greeting, but the angry expression on the man's face stopped him in his tracks when he got up from his desk and gave Kushina an accusing glare. It was clear that he was furious. Hiruzen demanded, "Who are you and why are you impersonating a dead woman?" He didn't want someone trying to deceive Naruto to break his heart with a lie. He wanted to mention Kushina's death in other ways, and this was not one of them. He would not allow someone to pose as Kushina in order to offend her memory. Kushina frowned. "Funny, I was about to ask you why you lied to me 13 years ago. Sarutobi-sama, after all, I was the one presented with a dead body of my son." "That's impossible," Hiruzen said. "I saw your body in the morgue after the attack. You were lying, and I will see to it that. I know who Naruto's father is. Sarutobi-sama, that little tidbit in and of itself should prove who I am. If not, then I can put on a display of my special chakra for you." The statement was unexpected to Hiruzen. Few people were aware of Kushina's chakra, but she might be bluffing about Naruto's father. Nobody was going to say anything about that, and only a few would be aware of it. When Kushina said, "I see that you finally recognize me, Sarutobi-sama," she sensed that a lot of people wouldn't think she was still alive, but this was going too far. Unfortunately, a messenger hawk with a message on its leg flew into the office before she could finish the discussion. Hiruzen's eyes widened in shock as he opened the message. Naruto questioned, "Is something the matter, Gigi?" "Yes, there is, Naruto. Apparently, Squad 10 has encountered some issues on their mission, and are requesting backup." Hiruzen took a moment to reflect. Although he appeared to be regretting his request, it appeared that time was of the essence. "I hate to ask this, Kurenai, but would it be possible for you and your squad to head to Nami no Kuni to act as backup for Asuma's squad? I know you just returned, but the sooner I can send backup, the sooner they can return safely." Kurenai turned to face her group. No one on her team appeared to be in any worse shape, and they were able to go on another mission because they didn't have to fight on the way back. She was aware that Kiba and Naruto were close to Choji and Shikamaru. Naruto was the only one who appeared a little nervous about leaving. He was just getting to know his mother before departing on another mission, so that was probably to be expected. Kushina turned and smiled at her son, sensing his struggle. "Don't worry, Sochi. I will still be here when you get back, and I need to sort some things out here anyway." Kurenai spoke to her superior after witnessing her student's determination solidify. "Team 8 can be sent out immediately, Hokage-sama." "Good, you will have a half hour to restock on what you need before you leave. I will make sure to inform your families about the sudden change in plans. You are dismissed." Kurenai received the message from Hiruzen after bowing. Team 8 departed to replenish supplies before heading to Nami no Kuni. Following Team 8's departure, Kushina looked back at Hiruzen. "So, what's this crap about me being in a morgue?" After taking a deep breath, Hiruzen began to explain. "After the attack, the village began to search through the wreckage for the dead and injured. We also searched for survivors. One of the members of Orochimaru's research and development department came to me as we were searching to tell me that you had died from an injury that you sustained during the attack. He led me to the morgue where I saw your body laying on an examination table." Kushina was furious. "Well, that's just perfect. I was given Naruto's body by a member of the R&D department shortly after the attack as well. I was told that Naruto died from the sealing process and that Minato-kun died as well, so it seems a certain snake lied to the both of us. Where is that snake bastard so I can kick his ass?" "I'm sorry to say this, Kushina, but Orochimaru defected a few months after the attack. We found him experimenting on some specimens, and he became a missing nin before he could be tried for his crimes. Hiruzen said he was not going to claim that he was the one who missed Orochimaru's trap. He was not going to attempt to explain that he was unable to kill his star pupil and that, despite the ideal circumstance, Hiruzen allowed Orochimaru to escape. After a few minutes of silence, Kushina started her next set of questions. I suppose you also have an explanation for why Naruto is unaware of his heritage, or the fact that he grew up alone. Hiruzen gave Kushina a weary glance. After the attack, our village was fairly venerable, Kushina, and I did not want to risk Naruto becoming a larger target of either Iwa or Kumo should anyone find out about Naruto's heritage. Jiraiya had left shortly after Orochimaru defected in order to make sure that he didn't try anything else, and Kakashi requested to be put in Enbu after the attack. Many people lost something in the attack, Kushina. I am aware of that, Hiruzen, but that still doesn't give people a free pass. Konaha is a ninja village, for Kami's sake. Do you really think that there would not be anyone in this village that would be willing to protect Naruto if they knew about whom Naruto's father was? Surely the Akamichi, Inuzuka, or the Nara would have supported Naruto. You had a village at your disposal, Hiruzen, and instead of standing up for Naruto and taking control of the village like you should have as Hokage, you let things slide. She prevented any more disputes. Look, I know you did your best, Hiruzen, but the point is you let things happen to Naruto that did not need to happen simply because you didn't want to take being reinstated seriously. I mean, no offense, but you had choices, and ignored them simply because you felt you were too old for the job. You let your will of fire burn out for reasons that should not have mattered. Hiruzen was aware of her correctness in retrospect. He realized that his excuses for letting things go were trivial because he was too lazy to actually make those changes for himself. He had allowed his counselors to make decisions for him and had refused to take responsibility for his mistakes. He had spent too much time making excuses about his age. You're correct, Kushina. I let my age become my scapegoat and rationale for the mistakes I have made instead of taking responsibility as Hokage. I claim that my age prevented me from taking direct action for that. I will admit that I have failed Naruto, as well as those that have come before me. Does this mean that you will let me tell him about his father when he returns, or will you bar me from that as well? It is your prerogative, Kushina. I was going to wait until he became a Chunin, so that he could face his father's enemies, but he does have a right to know about him. Kushina considered what to ask next. Is there anyone else that I should probably talk to? Hiruzen? I know that Naruto wanted me to meet the Ichirakus, though I doubt he knows of his connection to them, and I am sure that Iruka would like to know his sensei is back in town, and I already heard about the massacre, so I doubt Mikoto-chan is still alive to talk to. Better yet, I want to talk to Kakashi and Jiraiya myself before I meet anyone else. Well, Jiraiya left 2 days ago for another mission and won't be back until around the Chunin exams. And Kakashi should probably be at the Memorial Stone like he usually does before meeting his team. As for others to talk to, you may want to know that Yugo is also on a mission with her team, as is Hayate. The Aburame supported Naruto, so you may want to talk to Shibi Aburame. Other than those, I cannot think of anyone. I assume you also want to move back into your former household? Yes, I think Naruto has lived by himself long enough. It is time he had a proper home, not an apartment that he lives in. If he is to know of his father, he will need all that will be entailed. That includes his father's house. Very well, I will have a squad of my trusted Enbu take Minato's things from the vault and bring them to the house. I will also see to it that you receive anything that was to be given to Naruto. Once again, I am truly sorry for the way things have played out, Kushina. Kushina's expression was unreadable as he simply stared. Hiruzen, I accept your apology, but you still failed Minato and me. I know you have a lot more respect than you think you do. Even after all these years, if you are ever going to fully redeem yourself in my eyes, then you better make sure you take the reins of your village and actually act like a leader instead of like a feeble old man. Kushina started to walk away, but he halted and faced the old Hokage again. By the way, do you also happen to know where I might be able to find Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno? Hiruzen looked accusingly at Kushina. Is there a reason you wish to see those two? If you are looking for revenge, Kushina. Oh, please, I am not so petty that I would go and harm a child for revenge. Hiruzen, I just want to talk to the two of them. Naruto and his teammates told me about those two, and I want to talk to the two of them. I owe it to Mikoto-chan to see how Sasuke is doing, and I would at least like to see the little bitch that attacked my son. Kushina. With those words, Kushina left the office to look for her late husband's student and a few other people. Oh, don't worry. I won't hurt her. Scare her, maybe, but not hurt her. Hiruzen had to close his eyes. I have the feeling that this will not end well for anyone who ticks her off. If hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, then Kushina's wrath is as close to a demon as one can come without meeting a biju. On their way to Nami no Kuni, Team 8 was leaping from tree limb to tree limb. After a brief stop to replenish supplies, they had departed. Being back up meant that there was a good chance of a fight, so Kiba seemed excited about the prospect of seeing some action on this mission. Shino appeared unaffected. Hinata appeared a little anxious but otherwise unaffected, and Kurenai appeared determined. However, Naruto appeared somewhat depressed. He knew that as a ninja, he would frequently be called on missions back to back without a break, but he still wanted to spend more time with his mother. Kurenai turned to face her blonde heroine. Naruto smiled slightly, realizing that his sensei was most likely correct. Don't worry, Naruto. This mission probably won't last very long, so you will be back before you know it. Kiba inquired, what is our mission, Kurenai-sensei? Kurenai spoke to her team with her face forward. We are to assist Asuma-san and his team with their escort mission. Apparently, they had a run-in with some missing nin from Kirigakure no Sato, including a former member of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist by the name of Zabuza Momochi. Hinata inquired anxiously, WWE or G going to FF fight a member of that G group, Kurenai-sensei? Don't worry, Hinata, our main goal isn't to confront Zabuza. Our job will be to help Asuma's client, Tazuna. It was said in the letter that Tazuna was building a bridge for his land in order to stop Gato, a powerful business tycoon, from furthering Nami no Kuni into further debt. He will need protection from Zabuza until the completion of the bridge. This may mean fighting Zabuza directly, or it will mean taking out Gato's thugs. Don't you worry. If worse comes to worse, Asuma and I will take care of Zabuza. Hinata had a relieved expression. Kurenai couldn't help but look a little concerned, but the 4 genin now appeared determined to assist. There was a reason Zabuza was a missing nin. He would kill any of her students without hesitation. All Kurenai could do was hope they were prepared for what Nami no Kuni had in store for them. Kakashi had a dejected expression on his face as he gazed at the memorial stone before him. The son of the White Fang of Konaha had not had a good few months. It had been harder for him to train with Sakura and Sasuke than he wanted to acknowledge. Kakashi was getting close to the end of the metaphorical rope because of Sakura's impending nervous breakdown and severe depression, as well as Sasuke's contradictory attitude toward working with others. In an effort to advance his training, Sasuke would frequently leave Sakura behind during exercises. He would become irate when he had to redo an exercise to give his teammate a chance to catch up. For Kakashi, it was like seeing a younger version of himself, unwavering, mission-driven, and prepared to go to any lengths to achieve his objectives. Sasuke's attitude was not improved by his mounting annoyance at only getting 2 or 3 D-ranked missions per week as a result of the team's current setup. Although Kakashi was aware that Sasuke was most likely prepared for a C-ranked mission, he also understood that given the current configuration of the team, that was probably not feasible. Sakura, however, was a completely different story. Sakura had grown more reclusive and wary of her behavior ever since her encounter with Naruto. She appeared to be paranoid of people around her, would second-guess her choices, and would hold back during spars so as not to hurt anyone. Sakura would always shut down, remain silent, and be cautious of her training partner during team-building activities. If nothing else, her physical training had improved a little because she was terrified of being weak and useless. Although Kakashi was aware of her guilt over what she had done, she also understood that she needed to learn this lesson. Her behavior and manner, however, were starting to interfere with her training. Sakura's paranoia was exacerbated by the fact that the 2 Anbu assigned to her were always hidden away out of sight. Although Kakashi could see that she was trying, the girl's trust in herself and, to a lesser extent, in other people had been severely damaged by her own insecurities, fears of her abilities, and realizations of her gullibility. In the midst of all this, Sakura was starting to behave more and more like a certain heiress. Kakashi was desperate to find out how he could actually help her overcome her fears. Kakashi kept staring at his own image as he saw his reflection on the monument's surface. It felt like the stone was condemning him more and more the longer he stared. His life seemed to have consisted of a series of mishaps. He lost Obito during the terrible Third Shinobi World War, his mother passed away when he was a child, his father committed seppuku to atone for a botched mission in which he chose to save his team rather than finish the mission, and, to top it all off, Rin, his sensei, and his sensei's wife were all killed in the same night. For him, the list went on and on. He could now put his inability to keep Naruto safe on that list. Kakashi was undoubtedly near the bottom now if he hadn't already reached the bottom. When Kakashi saw a chakra signature behind him, it snapped him out of his angst. The person appeared to be merely standing behind them, but he was unable to sense any animosity from them. Instead of speaking to the person, Kakashi kept quiet, reasoning that if the person behind him wanted to speak, they would speak to him first. It's been a long time, Kakashi's gaze expanded. It had been 13 years since he had heard that voice. That couldn't possibly be her, could it? When he turned around, Kushina Uzumaki was there, in person, Just as sure as the mask on his face, Kakashi knew this was true, barring some kind of torture genjutsu. KK Kushina-sama. Yo, you're alive. Well, I'm not a ghost or a figment of your imagination, if that's what you were thinking. But, how? I mean, we all saw. It's a long story, Kakashi, one that I personally would rather tell at another time. After all, I would much rather hear about how, in the span of 13 years, you could let things get as bad as they were for Naruto and not do a damn thing to help out in the least. Kakashi gave his best response, but he was aware that he had no justification for what he had done. I wish I could say I had a perfectly good reason to not do anything, but I can't. Sure, I was in Anbu, and my duties as Jonin did keep me busy, but I can't claim either took all of my time up either. Kushina was anticipating some bullshit about not wanting responsibility, lacking the drive, or wanting Naruto to prove himself to Kakashi and approach him for assistance. Then why, Kakashi? Why would you not help Naruto? Because I couldn't live with the guilt. When Kushina received the statement, she was taken aback. What do you mean, Kakashi? As he responded, he avoided looking into her eyes. My whole life has been one foul up after another. Kushina-sama, I feel like all of my decisions have ended in tragedy. Every choice haunting me wherever I go. I guess, when it comes down to it, I was afraid that my past mistakes would catch up with me and affect Naruto somehow. He didn't need to get caught in the crossfire of my own poor decisions. I didn't want to risk losing someone else because of my own incompetence. The way Kushina saw Kakashi evolved previously, she believed that he was simply being ungrateful or indolent. Now, instead of the self-assured man of 1000 jutsu, she saw a man attempting to bear the burden of his past situation and deal with the guilt that came with it. However, she thought Kakashi might need a wake-up call because he was allowing his losses to get in the way of his obligations to his village and his students. That's why she had a sly smile on her face. It wasn't until it was too late that Kakashi heard a weapon summoning. He spun from the impact and face planted directly into the memorial stone after he turned around to see what Kushina was doing and ended up face to shaft with the business end of Kushina's staff. The masked shinobi suffered a severe headache after his face made a humorous thud against the rock. Like a teenager who has just had cold water thrown on his head, Kakashi questioned, "What was that for?" Kushina laughed and said, "Does it matter, Kakashi? You can't change the fact that I hit you, can you? After all, even if it meant hurting someone else, a good laugh never did anyone any harm." Before realizing the double meaning of Kushina's rather violent act, Kakashi was about to respond to it. Don't say he never learned to look underneath. Kushina most likely struck him to let out some of her rage, but Kakashi understood that she was trying to make a point because he was focusing so much on criticizing his past that he had forgotten about his current situation. He was avoiding action at this time by citing past errors as an excuse. And to think, if it weren't for that blow to the head, I probably wouldn't have thought of that. Kakashi said he found it somewhat ironic that after years of trying to tell him that it only took a simple whack to the face to make him face reality, he might have been on the ground laughing uncontrollably if the situation had been different. No, I suppose not, Kushina-sama. Good, now then, if you are done brooding, perhaps you should go and do, well, whatever you were going to do after you got done here. I have other people to meet, and other things to do, Kushina said as she walked away. Kushina then left a now anxious Kakashi to go about his business, saying, "Oh, and Kakashi, if I catch you doing this again, we will have a training session together, and I will make sure you earn that vest of yours." Following her conversation with Kakashi, Kushina made the decision to search the village for other people with whom she could converse. She didn't recognize many faces, but perhaps that was because she hadn't been as outgoing as she could have been during her years in the village. However, it was a trip down nostalgia lane for her to realize that some things remained the same regardless of how things change. When she passed the ninja academy and identified one of the teachers, who at the time were dismissing their classes, as Iruka Amino, she was taken off her journey. She could see that he had gone to become a teacher and make chunin while she was away. She remarked to herself, he always did have a way with kids. She decided to make a detour to the academy because she wanted to visit with at least one of her students and because she could take a break from her schedule. Iruka thought he saw a ghost from his past as he turned the corner after dismissing the last of his students for the day. He had assumed it was a trick, just like Kakashi, but he was angry. Unlike Kakashi, it infuriated him to see someone defaming her memory by mimicking her prior to her passing. He had been fairly attached to his sensei. Even knowing who her husband was, he therefore charged at the person and demanded that they stop, as anyone who wishes to exact revenge on their sensei would do. That was the plan, anyway, until... Oh, and how is everyone's favorite timid dolphin doing, Iruka-kun? Iruka came to a complete halt. Only his sensei and two former teammates had the audacity to refer to him as such. Hayate was currently out of the village, and Yugo was on Anbu detail for Sakura Haruno, so he left. Sensei? Yes? Iruka was nearly incredulous that his sensei was still alive even though he was thrilled to see her. There was one obvious issue that made him furious. Iruka was in her face, glaring at her and hardly displaying enough self-control to refrain from yelling before Kushina could inquire what was wrong. "Where were you? Do you even realize just how bad it was for Naruto while you were gone? Did you even care that he was here in the village? That was the furthest he went before Kushina slapped him. Pull yourself together. Iruka-kun yelling at me will not do you any good. Besides, shouldn't I at least get a chance to put in my ryo before you bite my head off?" Iruka was tempted to respond, but he was unable to come up with a reason why he couldn't at least listen to his sensei. He really wanted to know where she had been, after all. "Alright. Sensei, explain to me how you can justify being gone for so long." Kushina let out a sigh. It was going to be a lengthy discussion. After a lengthy explanation, Iruka wouldn't have believed the story he just heard if it weren't for the words that came directly from her mouth. Had his sensei been duped? Furthermore, she had been in a different region of the continent the entire time, only a mission away from Konaha's discovery. By the time his sensei was done, Iruka was busy getting his jaw off the floor. "And that is how I got back to Konaha, Iruka-kun. Hopefully, that gives you some idea of what I have been through." "Well, sensei, it does explains a lot, but I am still confused about one thing. Why would you leave without saying goodbye to Yugo, Hayate, or me? I mean, do you realize how much we all missed you after the attack? It was part of the reason that Yugo went into Anbu was because she thought you had died, not to mention Hayate's promotion to Tokubetsu Jonin. While you remained a Chunin teacher, I might add. The point is, why didn't you say goodbye?" A slight softening of Kushina's expression occurred. "I honestly thought you three would have been fine. You had all become capable Chunin and had already begun your paths to becoming great shinobi. I figured that the three of you didn't need me anymore, and it was not as if I had much left to teach you all anyway." Iruka jumped in, surprised that Kushina would think that of herself. "That's not true, Kushina-sensei. There was still plenty that we could have learned from you. Sure, we were Chunin, but that didn't mean that you were no longer a part of our lives. You were very important to all of us, important to me." Iruka's expression darkened, as if he were older than his years. "The Kyuubi's attack was a double knockout for me. Sensei, I lost both you and my parents in one night. What's worse, we didn't even know you were dead until Sarutobi-sama told us that your body had been found. It was as if anyone that I could have looked up to had been taken away from me. Then I remembered Naruto. I knew I couldn't look after him at the time, but when I first saw his name on the school roster, I couldn't wait until I could teach him." "So, you knew he was my son?" "There was only one Uzumaki in Konaha at the time. Besides, he does look a lot like his dear old dad, and I knew that you were faithful to him." "You knew who his father was?" "I had a guess, though why no one else has ever said anything is beyond me. It was probably some bull crap about enemies attacking our inflated egos and whatnot, I would imagine." Even Iruka had to admit that the reasoning behind that seemed strange, but he couldn't dispute it. Of the two enemies Konaha had at the time, Kumo was dealing with its own internal affairs problems during and immediately after the Kyuubi incident, not to mention the Hyuga incident at the same time. Iwa was neither powerful nor financially equipped to even send an assassin, much less launch a full-scale invasion, just to kill the child of their most notorious enemy. Of course, the first few years after the incident were difficult. "So, have I proven myself, Iruka-kun? Or is there something else I need to do to prove myself to you?" asked Kushina. She could see that Iruka had relaxed, but it was unclear if he had forgiven her. Iruka put a hand over his mouth, believing he had said too much, and Kushina waved him away. "Well, I'm still upset, but given what you have said, I suppose I can't blame you that much still. I guess my emotions have been a bit high since Naruto's accident." "If you mean his incident with Sakura Haruno, Iruka-kun, one of Naruto's teammates already told me about it. Speaking of, do you know where I can find his former teammates?" "Sensei, don't worry. I won't kill them. I just thought I would like to see who my son was going to be on a team with. What, were you expecting me to be some enraged berserker seeking vengeance?" She replied with a grin. She was a kunoichi, so she could exercise self-control even though she was insane. Iruka thought about keeping it from her, but he reasoned that since Yugo hadn't seen her yet, there wouldn't be any harm. She's on assignment right now watching Sakura Haruno. I can't say I know where Sasuke spends his time outside of the Uchiha district, so you will be on your own on that. Kushina vanished in a whirlpool of leaves after saying, "Thank you kindly. Now, if you will excuse me, Dolphin-kun. I have a few more people to meet in some places to refamiliarize myself to today. I will see you around." Iruka was left wondering what Kushina had just let loose on one of his former students. Iruka thought, "I hope this doesn't end up hurting me later."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.